Welcome to Classic Trials. If you're new here, my name is Alita. I'm a lawyer licensed in California and DC, and on this channel, we make sense of the law one bite at a time. In this series, we observe and analyze the play-by-play of some of the biggest trials that have shaped the public consciousness of the American judicial system. In this season, we're working our way through the case of California v. Erik and Lyle Menendez. Growing up in Princeton, New Jersey, and then Beverly Hills, California, these young men had everything they could ever want, or so it seemed, until one night on August 20th, 1989, they approached Jose and Kitty Menendez with newly purchased shotguns. Put on trial for murdering their own parents, they claimed self-defense, arguing they were terrorized in their own home by abusive parents until they could take no more. Which argument is more convincing? Come join and see for yourself. Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and a happy Monday to everybody. Happy Menendez Monday. We've got another one. I have a new, you guys have never met this one. That's because she's actually new to my parents' house. She's my aunt's cat. She's staying with my parents for a little bit. Her name is Zoika, but she's a very sweet kitty. So I don't know if she's going to join us for the whole thing, but for right now, we have another fur buddy. Right? You want to say hi, Zoika? Anyway, so she's hanging out here for a minute. Yeah, she's a very pretty kitty. Pretty kitty. Yeah. Hey, sweetie pie. So all right. I will say I apologize for anybody who has been, if anybody's been looking out for recaps for the last episode. I waited until the last minute to put out a recap, and then I missed it because we had things going on over the weekend. You know, obviously, like Mr. Bites and I are on vacation, and we also had some other family come into town, and so the weekend got it got picked up by all kinds of like family events. So I will try to compress the next recap. I mean, maybe I'll put out a recap like later today from last week, even though it's after today's episode. But from and then do another one, or maybe I'll compress episodes 31 and 32 into one recap. I am so sorry. I really wanted to be good about that, and making each one before the next episode. But anyway, but otherwise, last week we heard from the Whalens. We heard from Casey Whalen. We heard from his mother, I think Kathleen Whalen. And that was all about like the anti-Craig Signorelli, right? In so many ways. So it was, you know, he, number one, says that he was the one that saw the computer guy, not Craig Signorelli. And then also which kind of matches up with the original description that the computer guy gave for who was there at the house with him and his pregnant wife at the time. Right, because he has like sandy blonde hair, whereas Craig Signorelli has much darker hair. And then also like just in terms of like a friend being a friend, he's not, you know, not doing the things that just felt dirty when Craig Signorelli was testifying. I mean, this was like forever ago, right? This was like months ago that we were listening to this, which in the trial itself, it wasn't months in between the two. It was a much shorter period of time for that rebuttal testimony to come up. But so they anyway, but it was he was the anti Craig Signorelli, which was fascinating to see. And now there's this whole discrepancy of like who was actually there when the computer guy was there. And it would not surprise me if the computer guy was being honest and thought that Craig Signorelli was the person, because the brain can, over time especially, remember this was all in 1989 that this happened, and then their test. Oh, did you? Okay. I think she stepped on a cable for a second. My second screen went out. You know, this all happened in 1999 or 1989. They're testifying in 1993, 4 years in between. Like think back to 4 years ago. I know that I could potentially mistake the identity of some kid that I saw when I was working on something, right? Like it's definitely possible for your brain to trick you into confirming something that isn't actually accurate, but your brain is like, close enough. So he could be the computer guy could be being perfectly honest and just be mistaken as to which of the two guys is there, one way or another, right? Like it's entirely possible. So the question is, what kind of corroborating evidence is there to substantiate Casey being there versus Craig being there? In either direction, right? What kind of evidence is there to substantiate? And so for Casey's case, he's got his mom that's also testifying to him being around, Erik staying with the Whalens for a period of time. And picking him up from the airport and doing the things that a friend usually does, um as opposed to trying to sell the story to the media for $25,000, which is apparently what Craig Signorelli did. And also like tried to like steal his watch that he was holding on to for his friend, just like all kinds of things. Dishonesty, like it just that kind of stuff. So anyway, so today, oh, that wasn't the cat's fault. This is for some reason my second screen keeps going dark on me. I think it'll be fine though, hopefully. Anyway, so today we have 6 witnesses that we will be hearing from. They're gonna go pretty quick. So, I think today's probably gonna it's not gonna it's gonna be a lot of testimony, but I don't think it's gonna drag because of that. So, so yeah. So anyway, okay, we'll go through them really quick. So we've got Leslie Elmore to start off. She was a classmate at Princeton Day School, and I think also like lived in the neighborhood. Um, Barbara Howarth is after that, Erik's ninth grade English teacher at Princeton Day School. Then after that will be Norman Puls, Erik's math tutor. So we've heard a little bit of testimony about Erik's teachers, Erik's tutors. So we haven't heard from any of the tutors though, but there was some testimony about, you know, Erik's mom, Kitty, basically cheating on Erik and Lyle's behalf. And then also, a tutor doing the homework for Erik or Lyle. I think particularly Erik, because it sounds like he needed extra remedial help. So it'll be interesting to hear his testimony, see like what kind of instructions did you get from Erik and Lyle's parents as to how to help Erik um, in this way. Then we're gonna get into Skip Lowe. He's a Beverly Hills acquaintance. I don't know exactly how he knew them other than I only see like the little tiny snippets so that I can find the timestamps and just enough to get the context of who these people are, like the very basic context, because I don't want to ruin it for myself. He met them at some kind of a charity benefit dinner thing in Beverly Hills. Um, but it sounds like he didn't actually, like, know them from the very beginning of the testimony. And then we will be hearing from another Whalen. So we heard from Casey and his mom. We're gonna hear from Casey's sister, Katie Whalen, after that. And finally, Douglas Doss. He's the director of tennis at Mountaingate Country Club in Los Angeles. So we're gonna hear more tennis testimony, probably talking about how Jose was an abusive parent that just wanted to use tennis to abuse his kids. Essentially, that's what the defense wants us to think. And meanwhile, the prosecution wants to say, look, he was a driven parent. He wanted the best in his kids. He wanted them to succeed. And sometimes when in order to succeed at an elite level, sometimes you have to push your kids to quite an extent. So that's the two different interpretations of this kind of information, right? So anyway, so yeah, we've got a lot here. And there's going to be some oral argument. We're going to skip over it because it's like kind of extensive in most places. Um, then otherwise, except for like a 5 minute blip at one point, or it's like 3 minutes. So anyway, okay. Well, I hope you guys are doing well. I hope you've had a wonderful weekend, and let's get into it because we've got a lot of folks to go through today. All right. Let me know, as always, if there are any sound issues when I start the testimony.
Jurors present in court, and good afternoon.
Also, sorry. I'm like, let's start. Let's not start. Let's start. I will, as always, I will be updating whoever it is that's testifying in the chat. It's going to be in a pinned chat. So if anybody ever has a question, it's right there in the pinned chat. So just so everybody knows, easiest way to do it. And the entire list is also in the description below. So, okay. Thanks, guys.
Afternoon. Welcome back. And we're ready to resume with the trial. The defense may call its next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. We would call Leslie Elmore. Leslie Simone Elmore. E-L-M-O-R-E. Elmore. It probably works best for someone to turn this way.
This way?
Yeah.
Just face the lawyer.
Okay.
Right. And that way your mouth is facing.
Oh, sorry. You can't see the video.
Please spell your middle name for us.
Simone, S-I-M-O-N-N-E.
It's just me like watching. Okay, you guys can hear it. Great. Okay, here you go. Thank you for letting me know, guys. Okay.
Ms. Elmore, what's your occupation?
I'm a paramedic,
And where do you work?
Buncombe County EMS.
And what state is that? Excuse me, what county?
Buncombe County,
And where is Buncombe County?
North
Where?
Carolina.
How do you spell that?
County.
Buncombe, B-U-N-C-O-M-B-E.
Okay.
And where were you raised?
Princeton, New Jersey.
When you were growing up in Princeton, did you attend the Princeton Day School?
Yes, I did.
And was that for your entire education or just for part?
From first grade through senior year in high school.
And did your family have a membership in a country club called Bedensbrook?
Yes, I did.
And did you, along with your siblings, attend Bedensbrook?
Yes, I did.
Now, what is your mother's name?
Charlene Elmore.
And did she have a position at Princeton Day School?
She was a school nurse.
Did you know, on some level, Erik Menendez when you were growing up in Princeton?
Yes, I knew his brother was in my class in high school.
His brother Lowe was in your class?
Yes.
Erik was never in your classes?
No.
How old are you, Miss Elmore?
24.
And Erik was younger than you?
Yes.
Did you know when you were growing up in Princeton how much younger Erik was than you?
I'd say probably 2 years.
Now, turning your attention to the Bedensbrook Country Club, in the summertime, did that country club have a swim program for the children of the members?
Yes, they had a swim team.
And did you participate in that?
Yes, I did.
Were there times of the day when the children who were part of the swim team would be required to practice?
Usually either in the morning or in the afternoon.
Were there two separate practice sessions?
Yes,
set up?
there were.
And did you practice?
Yes.
And to your knowledge, in, say, the period between 1980 and 1982, was Erik a member of the swimming team?
Yes.
And did he practice?
He practiced by himself most of the time with his mother coaching him.
Did he also practice? Well, how did you practice? By yourself with your mother coaching?
No, I practiced.
Sustain.
Did the other children practice as a group?
Yes, they practiced. They were coached by the swim team coach.
Was one of those coaches a young woman named Meredith Krugman?
Yes.
And did Erik practice with the group as well?
I don't recall if he practiced with us or not. He was younger than I and would have swam with a different group.
Did the groups practice at different times, the age groups?
No, you could either swim in the morning or afternoon, but they didn't separate the age groups.
Okay. Now, you say did you observe Erik in practices with his mother?
Yes, I did.
And was she teaching him how to swim? Was she in the pool with him or what?
No, she was along the side of the pool, running up and down the side of the pool, asking him or telling him to hurry up. You have to swim faster. Often she had a stopwatch when she was doing so.
Were there other parents doing the same thing at the same time?
No.
Did you, in fact, ever see another parent doing that?
No.
And was this on one occasion that you saw Mrs. Menendez running by the up and down the side of the pool with the stopwatch, or was it more than once?
No, I saw her on several occasions doing it.
And I take it you and other members, other children who were members of the club were around when she would be doing that with Erik.
Usually, after our practice ended, Erik would still be in the water swimming, and Mrs. Menendez was there on the side of the pool.
Did you see Erik on a daily basis at the swimming pool at Beedensbrook during the summers?
I'd say I probably saw him several times a week.
And did you, apart from seeing his mother doing this, I guess was she timing him?
With the stopwatch, yes.
Apart from seeing her in that activity, was she just ever at the pool with him, like in a recreational way, just?
Not that I recall.
Now, you heard her telling him what when she was running up and down the side of the pool?
She would be shouting at him to hurry up, you're not swimming fast enough, you're never going to beat Rob Bergman. And Rob was, an excellent swimmer, and Erik was not even in the same age group with him.
Was Rob like the star of Beedensbrook swim?
Yes, he was.
And how much older? I take it he was older than Erik?
He's probably 2 or 3 years older.
And did you see, first of all, how many times would Erik have to swim and be timed by her in any given session? Do you know?
I wouldn't be able to count those times. I saw it happening several times.
What I'm saying is, would she just time him on one lap, or did he have?
No, in one occasion, he would do it several times. She would time him and keep telling him he had to go faster.
And were there any occasions when you saw some sort of emotional reaction on Erik's part to this behavior by his mother?
Yes, there was one instance where Erik had swam a lot that day and was cold, and he had gotten out of the pool and was standing with his hands together, clutching his arms to his side, saying he was cold, and Mrs. Menendez saying he had to get back in the pool and swim faster in order to beat Rob.
And did you see any reaction on Erik's part besides appearing to be cold?
He was almost to the point of tears.
And were there other kids around at that time within, say, hearing distance of what his mother was saying?
Yes.
Did Mrs. Menendez have any equipment that she would bring to these solo practices that she conducted with Erik?
A stopwatch.
What is a kickboard?
A kickboard is a flotation device that we use in the pool just to practice our kicking, get stronger in our kicking, and we wouldn't use our arms.
Did you ever see her having Erik use that kind of object while she was training?
Yes, I did.
Did you ever see her swim, by the way?
No.
Did you ever see her even in a swimsuit when she would be conducting these sessions?
No.
Roll the answer, will stand.
I did not. She often wore.
You've answered the question.
Okay. Can you describe what she was wearing?
Sustain.
Did she have clothes that looked like trainers' clothes, like the kinds of things coaches would wear?
Sustain.
Yeah.
Did you ever observe in these practice sessions Erik arguing with his mother or refusing to do what she asked him to do?
No.
Did you see him appear to be cold or say that he was cold on other occasions than the one you've described?
I remember that incident well because it was emotional for him, and it embarrassed me and some of the other kids who were at the pool.
So it was, from what you could see, it was noticed by the other kids?
Yes.
Did Erik have any friends that you saw him with at that pool?
No, not really.
Poor kid.
And were there times that you'd be there all day and he'd be there all day and he'd be by himself?
There were times that I was there all day, and Erik may or may not have been. He wasn't, unless his mother was there, I usually didn't notice him.
Okay. He was sort of invisible.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have a group of friends that were at the club that you associated with on the days that you would be there?
Yes.
Objection of relevant emotions.
Overall, the answer was fine.
Were there various sort of cliques of kids of different age
Yes.
groups?
Mhm.
There were a lot of children at the pool over the course of the summer,
Yes.
weren't there? Do you know why it is that you remembered this particular behavior of Mrs. Menendez so many years later?
Objection of relevant.
Sustained.
Were there always coaches available at the Beedensbrook school?
Yes, there were.
On the days that you would see Mrs. Menendez there, were those days that the coaches had been there and were training the children?
Yes.
Did you ever see Lyle Menendez at Beedensbrook?
Yes, I did, but he mostly played tennis, and he would have to wait before he'd come down to the pool after he played.
And would you see Lyle playing tennis? Could you see the tennis courts from the pool?
Yes.
But did you ever see Erik and Lyle together over the course of an entire day at Beedensbrook?
During the entire day, no. They were together, throughout the day periodically, but not usually together the whole day.
Would Lyle come down from the tennis courts to the pool from time to time?
Yes.
Now, based on what you observed, did you think that Mrs. Menendez just wanted what was best for her son, Erik?
Objection calls for speculation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did she appear to be a concerned parent to you?
Objection calls for speculation.
Also calls for speculation. Yeah.
Could you characterize the way she spoke to Erik when she was there with him during these swim practices?
She was loud and often raised her voice at him, shouting at him.
Did you ever hear her praise his performance or praise anything he was doing?
No, not that I remember.
Did you ever hear her make any statements specific to how much time he had to, that he would have to complete a lap, or how much time he had to shave off or save in order to be a better swimmer?
Tenths of seconds. It wasn't much time.
What did you hear her say in that regard?
That he had to hurry up. He had to go faster in order to beat Rob. And
Did she say anything about you've got to shave off X amount of time or anything like that?
not that I remember specifically what the times were, but she did say that he had to hurry up.
From your observations of Erik at the pool, and I take it you also made observations of him at meets and for the swim team. Let me ask you this. Did you enjoy swimming?
Yes.
Overall.
What would you say about Erik? Did he appear to enjoy swimming? Did it,
Overall, you can answer the question.
He did during the meets. I mean, I think all kids enjoyed being at the meets because it was a competition and something for them to do.
what about at other times?
When he was practicing, I don't think he enjoyed that.
When he was practicing with his mother, or when he was practicing with the team, or both?
With his mother, particularly.
Thank you. I have nothing further on.
Cross-examination?
So I will say, so we're going to go into cross-examination. I will say though, that this witness doesn't feel necessary. Like I haven't heard anything that we haven't already gotten from other witnesses previously. And if you were to listen to this testimony about, I mean, this is really just about Kitty, right? I mean, I guess we've mostly heard about how Jose was in terms of like driving the kids, driving training, all of that kind of stuff. So I, this is now talking about Kitty, but there's nothing here that sounds like it's abuse on its own. At most you could say in like accumulation with all of the testimony that we've heard so far, this just adds into it. It adds another layer to the way that they raise them, and the amount of pressure that they put on the boys when they were little. And so that's at most what we can get from it, from looking at this from a defense perspective. Other than that, it's really just, you could also look at it from the perspective of the prosecution and say, this is just a mom training her kid. If she's giving him tough love, she's giving him tough love. Like, that's not abuse. So this one kind of feels like we're starting to get into the second stringers, third stringers, if you know American football. Like, this isn't exactly like the starting players on the team, right? We're getting into like backup testimony almost, it feels like. I wonder if maybe they were on the fence about calling her and they had like a scheduling issue, and so they needed to call in someone to testify. Like, it could be a situation like that. But otherwise, her testimony does not at all feel essential here. So this is interesting that they did that. That they've got her testifying after everything that we've heard already. Also, Elizabeth DeJong, welcome back to Bite Club. I see you've become an Apple now. Thank you so much for supporting the channel once again, and I appreciate having you here. And on Friday, we will be doing another casual members only live stream. So I hope you can join in for that while we just kind of hang out and chat. I just, I engage with the chat and just have a relaxing morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time zone you are in. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. I really appreciate it. And also, there was a question earlier from Dalabar, says, do you plan on going through things like jury interviews and stuff after the trial on stream? I've been trying to avoid things, but did cave and read bits of interesting jury interview from the first trial. I might, I might do like a pre-recorded kind of sort of a wrap up on my thoughts on the trial, like a pre-recorded, produced kind of video, possibly. We'll see, but or I might just do some more live streams to kind of talk about this case, since this whole series has been on live streams. But yeah, I think afterwards, kind of looking a little bit at some interviews with the attorneys, interviews with the jury would be very, very interesting to see at the end of all of this. Absolutely. It would be great. A great way to like wrap up this season, right, of classic trials. So, okay, let's continue on here now.
Have a motion.
Yes.
Okay. Cross-examination.
I have no questions, John.
All right. Thank you. May I step down? Your excuse.
Oh,
Your next.
no cross-examination. Okay.
Barbara Howarth, Howarth.
Mrs. Howarth, what is your occupation?
I'm a teacher. I teach English at Princeton Day School.
And how long have you been a teacher?
I've been teaching for a little over 30 years, about 21 of them at the day school.
Now, directing your attention to the years 1985 to 1986, did you have Erik Menendez in an English class at Princeton Day School?
Yes, I did. I taught ninth grade English that year.
And was that a class that met 4 days a week?
Yes.
About how long would each class last?
They would vary. Some classes were 40 minutes, others were 55, depending on the day of the week.
And in addition to the class session, did you have a a regular time where you met one-to-one with Erik?
Yes, I meet with all my students once every 2 weeks for at least 15 minutes. If they'd like more conference time than that, we can set that up.
Now, this was a class that began in the fall of 1985 and ended in the summer of 1986.
That's correct.
And during the course of those months that you taught Erik Menendez, would you grade him?
Yes, the students were graded 4 times a year officially, and at the end of each marking period, we would write a comment as well as a grade.
And have you had an opportunity to review your comments for Erik Menendez during 1985 and 1986?
Yes, I have.
May I approach, Your Honor, with Exhibit 197?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm showing you a packet of documents that have been tabbed. Do those appear to be Princeton Day School records about Erik Menendez?
Yes, they are.
Now, in addition to the 4 comments, is there something called an interim report that you might make about a student?
And in the middle of every marking period, there's a possibility for an interim. There's also a possibility at any other time during the marking period when there was particular concern about an individual student. Not every student would get an interim.
Now, directing your attention to October of 1985, did you prepare an interim report about Erik Menendez?
Yes, I did.
And at the time you prepared that report, how long had he been in your class?
He had been in the class for about 1 month. At that time, a month and a half, and I was concerned about his performance. So even though I did not worry that he was going to fail the course, I wanted to call to the parents' attention the fact that he was having difficulties more than normal.
What sort of difficulties was he having?
Erik had trouble meeting assignment deadlines. He often misunderstood the directions for assignments. He sometimes did not do well on quizzes, especially pop quizzes that were unannounced. He seemed to have trouble keeping track of when the class met. The class did not meet at the same time every day. And for my particular class, we did not even meet in the same place every day. I used a computer room for some writing and the classroom. And Erik was frequently late because he had gone somewhere else instead.
Now, do you have any particular example in mind when you say that he had difficulty following instructions?
Yes, he would have, it would run the whole gamut of types of things that he had trouble with. Some were as mundane as proper heading on a paper, or even remembering to put his name on a paper. Other times he would, if the instructions were to include 3 characters in the example, in the examples that he brought into the assignment, he would only have 1 or 2. And it didn't seem to matter whether I would often hand out written instructions and then go over them orally, or have students read and question the instructions. And even with that double enforcement, he would not understand.
Was Erik a particularly anxious student that you, is that something that you noticed during the first month that you taught him?
I mentioned that in the first interim and in several others. and in several other comments. He was anxious about, clearly anxious about grades. He would, I would refer to it as his having something that was getting in his way, and I didn't know what.
Mrs. Howarth, was there ever any contact made by either of Erik's parents regarding the interim report that you made that was in October of 1985?
No, there was not. They did not respond directly to any of the comments that I made throughout the year.
Okay.
So interesting. Very, very interesting bit here. And I want to point something out because I was literally having the same thoughts when this chat came up. Dater says, I watched the pieces I missed last week. I changed my mind. Erik definitely has signs of ADHD. I was a bit hesitant because trauma can give similar symptoms as ADHD. But I read some articles that suggest that certain forms of trauma can, during your developing years, childhood, can lead to the development of ADHD. Well, I don't know about that specifically, but I think it was either last week, maybe the week before, in a recent stream. I remember I mentioned how it sounded to me like Kitty had ADHD, maybe, possibly some undiagnosed. I mean, again, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not none of those things. I am not qualified to diagnose anyone, but um the chronic lateness, the disorganization, to the extent that like the whole house is kind of in chaos, like those things could be signs of ADHD. Obviously, that doesn't automatically mean ADHD or anything like that, and that ADHD doesn't automatically show up looking exactly like that. But because it's a little different sometimes from person to person based on the workarounds that you've developed over time and yada yada yada. But if Kitty did have it, and there's also a link between ADHD and dyslexia, we've heard from another teacher that Erik probably was dyslexic, or she has suspected that he was dyslexic. There's a connection between that and ADHD sometimes. Like there can be a connection between those two. So it could be that he has a cluster of things. He could definitely have and I was reading these symptoms too and thinking this sounds like ADHD. Trouble meeting assignment deadlines. Check. Difficulty following instructions. Check. Didn't do well in pop quizzes. Could be for a number of reasons, but that could be trouble keeping track of when and where class met. Oh my God, what an ADHD nightmare. If you have a class that is changing times and places for when you're supposed to meet, what an absolute nightmare. Um, so I and I'm saying I say this, all of this with a little bit of familiarity. I actually haven't told you guys this. But I myself was diagnosed back in May. And I've been sort of processing all of that. But yeah, there's a lot of recognition that I'm having here with a lot of these things. And I can also very much empathize with the pressure to perfect, like in order to succeed, and like the amount of like pressure that he felt to like really do well on a test. Like he would be absolutely ecstatic over the moon because it means like boom, you've reached it, you've managed to do it. Great. So yeah, Tater, the processing of adult diagnosis. It's a roller coaster, isn't it? I don't know if you're talking if you're talking from personal experience, but yeah, and then you start to see it in a lot of different places. And then you're also talking with friends, like friends that you've had for a long time, and you're like, "Oh, I was diagnosed recently." And they're like, "Oh my God, you too." And then you start talking about all of the things, like all of the signs that you started to notice, and you're like, "Oh, okay, cool. Let's talk about it." um, and Draco, Amy, not all of us, but there's a core group of us um, Yeah. So I've been shout out to Emily D. Baker and Rob and Ian for being like my guiding, lawyer friends, YouTube lawyer friends who have kind of helped me through the whole thing. But yeah, they have been absolutely wonderful. And also them talking about it helped me to sort of identify my stuff for myself. Like, why am I struggling with things? Why is it that as my life opens up and I have less and less structure from the outside, I am struggling more? How is this happening? What is going on? Um, so yeah, cool, fun times. So yeah, I'm definitely recognizing uh quite a bit of ADHD here. It might not be. It might just be that I'm just seeing it looks like that to me because that's like at the forefront of my brain. So it's probably important for me to state that because if I'm seeing it, my radar might be personally biased. Um, so so yeah. So anyway, it definitely could be that he has a cluster of things. Based on what I have learned about ADHD and some of this other stuff that tends to like live amongst it, and it's very highly heritable, right? Very highly heritable. So seeing these things like within the family, some symptoms that seem to be kind of similar. And this is the early 90s, by the way. I highly doubt that anybody here like around in 1993 was looking at these data points and was like probably ADHD because at the time ADHD was such a new thing and they were like, "Oh, it's just for like little boys that are like running around um like running around jumping off the walls and like, going crazy and you grow out of it, like it's just for little boys." So I would totally imagine that like, no one would be thinking about Kitty having it. No one would be thinking about Erik at this age having it. This is a ninth grade teacher, right? So it's like the irony though, right? Because like as life gets more complicated, that's when you're more likely to have symptoms like showing up. So, okay. Anyhow, let's continue on.
Uh, you mean they didn't call you or try and talk to you about what you had written about their son?
That's correct. They didn't ask for a conference. Parents often call on the phone when something goes home. They did not call. I never met Mr. Menendez.
Let me ask you, did you see Mrs. Menendez at the school?
Yes, she was frequently at school, especially toward the end of the day. And she would be sort of waiting around, I assumed, to take the boys. They had a very busy schedule. And she would often be either just outside the classroom or she would come into the classroom to look at the bulletin boards at the end of the day.
Was that when the children were there, when they had left?
It was often just as class was being dismissed, and usually students hang around, sometimes to talk about important things, sometimes just to hang around.
And did Mrs. Menendez, when she was there after school, ever say to you, well, what about the interim report?
No, she did not. She would, however, tell me about Erik, tell me that he was studying much harder, that she thought that he was getting better at problems that he had in English, that he was enjoying English so much this year. I sometimes felt that she was directing what my next comment should say, but she did not ask me about specifics in previous comments.
You said that she was directing, you felt that she was directing what your next comments should say. Meaning what?
Meaning that in her view, he was getting better and spending more time at English, which was going to improve his performance.
Okay, and did you, as his teacher, observe any such behavior on Erik's part?
Not anything consistent. Erik was very good at some areas of English. I don't think he realized that he was good at those. He tended to see his weaknesses rather than his strengths. And many times it was his strengths were in non-graded areas, discussion, for example. So he would not get the feedback, the immediate feedback that he would get on written work, on tests, on quizzes.
Now, one of the things that you mentioned in your comments, I believe it was the one in June of 1986, was that Erik, there seemed to be a panic or a block operating with Erik.
Objection, leading.
Rephrase the question, please.
Did you ever see a panic or block operating on Erik that interfered with his learning?
My comments indicate that I did. I was concerned because something was getting in his way. He seemed, especially toward the end of the marking periods when grades were about to be officially declared, he seemed very anxious. In our conferences, when he was trying to come up with paper topics, I had thought that perhaps things were just too structured, and that if I gave him more leeway to come up with things on his own, that he would be more relaxed. But that would, when I would try open-ended assignments with the class, Erik in his conference time would need a lot of help and reinforcement to get what it was he wanted to write about clarified. He saw everything as potential. He seemed to see everything as potential danger. He did not distinguish between a quiz or a test or a major paper. Everything was the same level of importance. He didn't have a very good sort of sense of where he was or the connectedness as far as procedure.
Did Erik have any basic skill problems that you noticed?
Yes, he in writing, he is a terrible speller, worse than I am. He had a great deal of trouble with end punctuation, which is not usual for a ninth grader. He just didn't know. He would write numerous sentence fragments, run-on sentences using a comma instead of a period, which is a little bit more common.
Run-on sentences, kind of like how a neurodivergent brain thinks, or if we're thinking this theory, right, of ADHD, like how an ADHD brain would think, just a series of like thoughts compounded into one long sentence, which is why for me personally, doing pre-recorded videos is great because it gives me a chance to take a look at these super long sentences that I write and realize I need to take a breath in between. Let's break this up into sentences, like actual sentences. But I don't know. No confirmation on any of this, but just like, just a theory, right? by self-recognition.
Other punctuation was just, he couldn't get a hold of it. He had some problems in sequencing. There seemed to be problems in his processing material that was raised in class discussion, although he himself was good at class discussion. But drawing together the information from his classmates in an organized way, or things that I would say, something broke down.
Did you notice that Erik had any problems concentrating?
Yes, there would be. If the discussion was very rapid, and if people only said a little bit and it moved quickly, he was right there and following. But if either I talked too long or one of the other students talked too long, he would seem to drift away. And then in some days he seemed preoccupied.
What do you mean by talk too long? Talk for an hour?
No, no, the class is only 40 minutes. 3, 4, 5 minutes. And some students and some teachers do that.
Okay. What about Erik's self-confidence level?
As a ninth grader, it was very low.
Imagine.
He, as I say, I don't think he realized what his strengths were. I think he was very concerned about how he was doing and measuring himself every minute, but not feeling that he was doing as well as he should have been doing.
Now, was there a particular behavior that you noticed on Erik's part before testing?
Yes. If it were a test that he knew was summarizing an entire book, or if he were asked to take a quiz for which he knew he was not prepared, he would become very upset and he would cry.
Okay. And that would be in class?
Yes.
Was that unusual for a ninth grade boy to cry in class?
Yes, it's very unusual. Some ninth grade boys who are under the same or under similar stress situations will either be angry, explode in anger, or will leave the room. But most ninth grade boys do not cry, especially in front of their peers.
And what about when Erik received a poor grade? Would that also prompt him to cry?
Yes, and so what I tried to do in that, I assumed it was kind of embarrassment because no matter what a teacher.
As it relates to speculation.
All right, the objection is sustained. Everything after yes is stricken as non-responsive. Your next question, please.
Thank you. Did you do anything as a result of Erik's crying when he got a poor grade?
Yes, I would give him his papers back either before or after class. He was not the only one who would get his paper back then, so I didn't feel that I was shifting the spotlight and putting him in a different spotlight. Good students would get their papers back, some weaker students.
Okay. Now, I want to ask you about an incident that happened towards the end of the school year. What did you assign the class an oral report to do?
Yes, the last 2 books we did were The Grapes of Wrath and Cry the Beloved Country. And every student was to give a 2 to 4 minute oral report on some aspect of the author, something having to do with the book. Erik was to do something on Cry the Beloved Country, which was probably in the last 3 weeks of school.
And oh my gosh, yeah, bright eyes. He must have been so stressed to start crying in front of everyone. I mean, it must be that like whatever it was he was concerned about, that concern was bigger than what his peers thought of him. Like that seems to be pretty clear because yeah, as David Puff says, crying in 9th grade as a guy is a death sentence. And yeah, not literally, but yeah, I mean, it's 9th grade, that's your freshman year of high school for most people in the United States. I can only imagine. I can only imagine that people would look at that very sideways. And especially for a guy. It's really, really hard for boys to show emotion. I would imagine in the 80s, it was even more difficult to show emotion than it is like today. But Oof, yeah, really rough. But also, I completely forgot to do this earlier. Sandra Ramirez, thank you so much for gifting 5 Legal Bites memberships. Courtney Plaisted, Roxana, Sandra, Shibaka Wookie, and Karen Vaughn have all been gifted memberships by Sandra. So thank you so much to Sandra. Very kind and very generous of you. And to all of you who are now in Bite Club, welcome to Bite Club, or welcome back in some cases to Bite Club. I recognize some names there. Wonderful. I hope to see you guys on Friday at the members only live stream. And also Draco Amy gifted 1 Legal Bites membership. Delabar was gifted that one. So thank you so much to Draco Amy for gifting it, for supporting the channel as well. And wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you. But yeah, this poor kid. He definitely was under a tremendous amount of stress. And also, member chat from Jan, member for 8 months, says, "Hi, Alita. Hey, Jan. Hope you're doing well. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon for you, I believe." Okay, let's continue on.
And did Erik, in fact, give an oral report on Cry the Beloved Country?
Yes, he did.
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
All right, I assume you're getting to the point here. If
Yes,
you can expedite that, please.
Was there anything unusual about his performance?
Again, he had not followed directions. The report was supposed to be 2 sources and in note form on note cards from which he was to speak to the rest of the class. Instead, Erik's report, he read his report from note cards, and the vocabulary was, he had trouble pronouncing some of the words, didn't seem to understand what was behind some of the sentences, and so I felt it was not his own work.
Okay. And did you, at some point, discover a book with the same oral report that Erik had given?
Yes, he had copied it word for word from the World Book.
Right. Now, as a result of this incident, did you have a meeting with Erik and with his mother?
Yes, his mother, Erik, Sanford Bing, who was the head of the upper school at that time, and I met in Mr. Bing's office about the oral report.
And at the conference that you had with Mrs. Menendez, did you show her Erik's note cards and then the World Book Encyclopedia?
Yes, not immediately. She started the conference. She was angry at me. She said I had been picking on Erik all year, that I was unfair to Erik, that Erik would not do anything like that, what I had said. She was a very difficult woman to interrupt, and I tried several times to say, "Wait, I have something to show you." Mr. Bing said, let's start this again. And I had the assignment sheet which explained what Erik was to have done. I had the World Book. I had his note cards.
And did you show her these things?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And did her attitude towards this change after you showed her these things?
Yes. She looked at it very quickly and then turned on Erik and was upset with him, which was not unusual if a parent is embarrassed about.
Okay, well, you're going beyond the question.
Okay.
Don't tell us what other people did.
Let me
All
ask you another question. What specifically did Mrs. Menendez say to Erik?
She said that how could he do this to the family name? How could he lower this family honor and bring disgrace upon the family? which to my mind was not the point.
Okay,
And-
yes, answer the question.
All right. But she spoke about the family name and family honor.
That's correct.
And may I just have a moment, Your Honor?
Don't know why the sound went out again.
Yes.
Was she very angry?
She continued her criticism for quite a while. I would characterize it as angry.
And how did you react when Mrs. Menendez became angry and started speaking to Erik about the family honor?
Objection to writing.
Sustained.
What did you do when Mrs. Menendez began saying these things to Erik?
Objection irrelevant.
Asking, what did she say in
Yes.
this group meeting? You can answer that question.
I was,
No, just what did you say, if anything?
okay. I said that what I wanted Erik to see was that not following directions could get him in serious trouble. That if he were taking a shortcut, it was not helping himself. It was not showing him what he could do. That getting the assignment finished was not the point, but the process. And that he had made a mistake, but he was not a terrible person. That it was part of what I'd hoped would be his learning experience.
Did you do that to try and protect Erik from his mother's anger?
Objection irrelevant.
Sustained.
Did you feel that as Erik's teacher, it was necessary for you to do anything to intervene when his mother became so angry?
Objection irrelevant.
Sustained.
And your was there any reaction on the part
Thank
of
you for that,
Mrs.
Care Bear.
Menendez to your kind of explaining to Erik that a mistake, that shortcuts weren't good?
She, when I had finished, she returned to her idea of she couldn't believe that she couldn't see how he could do such a thing.
Mrs. Howarth was copying word for word from a World Book Encyclopedia, a particularly clever way of not doing your own work.
It was not deviant.
Order.
Your answer.
It was not devious. That was one of the reasons that I felt that we should handle this situation with the head of upper school. He didn't change the word order. He didn't substitute vocabulary for words that he didn't know. He didn't omit. And it was the World Book. It was just word for word from the World Book. So it was not streetwise if he were trying to.
Let me just ask you questions about one additional area. You're aware that Erik had an older brother named Lyle,
Yes, I am.
and Lyle also went to PDS.
That's right.
He was 2 years older than Erik.
He was a senior when Erik was a freshman.
Mrs. Howarth, how did you first become aware that Erik had an older brother named Lyle?
Everyone at school knew Lyle. Lyle was very good at tennis and brought a great deal of positive publicity to the school. And I taught Lyle at the end of his senior year, but before that I had read quite a lot about Lyle in Erik's journal.
Okay, what's the journal?
In the ninth grade, students are asked to keep a journal, not write in it every day, but once a week, once every 2 weeks. There would be an open-ended assignment of write about a member of your family, write about something you did last weekend. The idea for the journal was to have students writing about things they knew well about and to develop a fluency. From that journal, some later writing assignments would grow.
And would you read your students' journals as part of your class?
But I would collect them every 4 weeks or so, or we would go
Ooh.
over them in
Sure, that's
conference.
very
I did not
revealing.
grade the journals. I would either write a letter back to the student about things in the journal, or I would talk to the students in conference about the journal.
What did Erik write about in his journal?
I would say 70% of his journal was about Lyle. Then there was entries about sports, a few other entries.
What would he write about, Lyle?
Objection, relevance.
Did Erik, based on your reading of his journal and seeing him in class, seem to look up to his older brother?
Very much so. I often thought it wasn't just that he wanted to be like Lyle.
Objection, speculation.
All right, you've answered the question. Everyone after yes is stricken as not responsive.
I just have a moment, right?
Yeah, definitely
Did
having.
Erik ever, in his journal, express a desire to be like his older brother?
Objection, relevance.
Overall, you've answered.
He
Yeah.
Do you recall that specifically, yes or no?
not in his journal, no.
Okay, did he ever express a desire to be like his brother outside of his journal?
There was one conference that we were talking about something that he had written about sports, about soccer. He was very good at soccer, and I asked him why he was not concentrating his sports efforts on soccer. He was wonderful on the soccer field. And he said, because Lyle plays tennis. And at the time I thought that's ninth grade logic at work that I don't understand.
Okay, thank you very much. I have nothing further at this time.
That's interesting. I mean, yeah, there's definitely a very strong case of like golden boy brother Lyle, where Erik is just always trying to sort of catch up, measure up to Lyle. Yeah. And just like wanting to be like his big brother and never quite measuring up in a lot of ways. It's so tough. So tough. Regardless of like even like outside of this other stuff that's been going on throughout their childhood. Whew.
Cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And by the way, I saw in the chat that Andy was in the chat. He's like, "Who's Lyle?" I don't think he was joking. Andy, that's one of the defendants. Erik and Lyle Menendez, they're the two defendants. Pay attention, man.
Ma'am, did you require that your students keep journals for your class?
Did I
Is that it?
require that they
Yes.
keep? Yes, every student kept a journal.
Would they have a notebook for their journals?
Shape of the journal was up to the students. Some used spiral notebooks. Some used those notebooks that are black and white spatter on the cover. I asked that they not keep it as a part of their loose leaf notebook, however, because I wanted to be able to look with them at the progression of their writing through the year.
So did your students keep the journal for the entire semester,
For the year.
for the
But-
whole year?
Yes, but they did not write in it on a regular basis. It would depend on the other work that they had in the class. The writing was time consuming, and we often had very long reading assignments. They wouldn't have been able to do everything at once.
Now, you had indicated that the class was about 40 minutes long, is that right?
Some days it was 40, sometimes it was as much as 55.
Did you see any of your students, their attention kind of wandering during the course of the class?
Yes,
That wasn't uncommon
it's less common than you might expect because
in your class?
because of the pace, and because in my classes, as often as possible, I like to have the students carry the load. So I will ask a general question and let them respond. My role as teacher is to observe what the way they are responding, the roles they play in discussion. Sometimes I would sit on they would be in a fishbowl, and the fishbowl discusses, and the circle around the fishbowl comments on the process of the discussion, and I keep track of the movement in the class.
Okay, I
So
think I lost you at the fishbowl. What do you mean by that?
students sit in the center and discuss an idea, half the students. The other half sit around the outside, and after 10 minutes, 15 minutes, when I stop the discussion, they comment on what they've noticed about the way the discussion went and the roles that their peers had in the discussion. I would sit outside the circle and take notes on whether a student initiates, summarizes, helps another student into the discussion, all the different roles that they
Is
can
that the
have.
format that you had for your class throughout the year?
No, but twice a week, probably, something like that. So it was very important for the students to be actively involved in the class. I run very few lectures. We don't sit in the same places all the time.
So there were 4 times that you would meet, this class would meet per week.
4 times a week, that's correct.
And the 2 other days that you didn't have this particular format, would it be a lecture format?
No, it would probably be small group work, or I'd give I don't like to lecture. It doesn't work for most high school students in my mind. So I don't lecture.
Would you see some of your students get bored on occasion with what was going on in class?
Yes, I would see a student or two. Some sounds like too many.
Okay. Now, would you say that it was fairly common in your experience in over 20 years of teaching that 9th graders are generally self-doubters at that period of their education?
It's a difficult transition year for many. Yes.
And did you indicate that it's fairly common for 9th graders to be self-doubters?
Not common enough to get interims and have it mentioned in reports home. There's a certain level of insecurity that you expect, and then there are some students who move beyond that level of uncertainty and self-doubting. But maybe in 2 classes, maybe 2 or 3 a year that need extra nurturing, the extra concern.
Do you remember
Giving a report?
giving an interview?
Yes.
And do you recall saying that it's fairly common for 9th graders to be self-doubters?
Objection, Your Honor. Not impeaching.
Overall.
But what I'm saying is that,
Question is, do you remember saying that?
yes,
Now, let's get on to another topic here. You were saying that there was a problem that Erik Menendez.
Object, Your Honor. Counsel didn't read the entire sentence to the
All right, let's have Ms. Morrison state these objections.
Objection, Your Honor. The entire sentence isn't being stated.
All right, the objections overall.
Sorry. So what happened there just now is, okay, so Miss Morrison, the attorney in pink, is the one who did the direct examination for this witness. So typically the person that's doing the direct examination, then on cross-examination, that is the person who's supposed to say objections. It's not always, different courtrooms can be different, but in a lot of places, that's typically how it works. And that's how it works in this courtroom. So on the flip side, during direct examination, the person who was making objections was Kuriyama, because he was the one that was doing the cross-examination later. So so here, you've got Leslie Abramson jumping in with an objection, and very fiercely so. And I didn't even notice. I think she had been making objections during this cross examination previously, I think. But anyway, regardless, she jumped in, and the judge said essentially like, you're not supposed to be the one to be objecting. You know that. So he's like, I'm going to let Miss Morrison make an objection. And she literally just said the same thing. She kind of like looked over at Leslie and was like, objection. She needs the entire sentence to be read. He didn't say the whole sentence that she gave to the media in that interview. Um, Realistically, that's an objection that's going to be overruled anyway, because it's the kind of thing that you bring up on redirect, right? If there's, you can object because it's kind of the objection really is like, it's an improper impeachment, because what he was asking about was it's a statement that she gave in an interview, was that, it's typical for ninth graders to struggle with self-confidence, which I think would probably agree. The question is, do they struggle to the level that Erik struggled, that she saw Erik struggle? That's a different question. So, but regardless, that is the kind of thing that like when you have a witness, you've got this back and forth between direct examination, cross examination, and then it's like a tennis match, right? Between the both sides asking questions. You've got the direct examination, cross examination, redirect. Sometimes you've got a recross and then a redirect, and then you go back and forth until you're done. Different courtrooms are different. Some courtrooms only allow direct, cross, redirect, and that's it. Again, it depends on courtroom. It depends on what the judge decides for that particular case. If the judge anticipates that they'll just go on forever and ever and ever, amen. So there's different considerations, but so it was kind of a funny moment here that it's almost like Miss Morrison here was asleep at the switch a little bit and was like, whoops, I was supposed to object and I didn't. And okay, thank you, Leslie. Kind of like, I will make the same objection, say exactly what she said. So anyway, kind of funny, but yeah, just a little bit of I wanted to explain that a little bit to you guys of like what exactly that was. Also, PG Patty Joe, thank you so much for the generous super chats. As I'm just realizing you're covering this groundbreaking trial, my OCD requires I go back and start watching your vids from the beginning. I'd love seeing you all chat. Oh, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much for the super chat. Very kind of you. And I completely understand. I would be the same way. I'm generally the same way. I've got to start from the beginning, right? Even with like, whether it's a live stream series or it's a TV series or anything, movies. This is why I haven't seen a single Marvel movie or TV show in several years, because, since Loki, because I haven't been able to keep up and I feel like I'm like tumbling under the waves of Marvel content. So, yeah. I completely understand. But anyway, but hopefully you'll be able to watch through from the beginning and then get caught up, and then you'll be, I mean, we're going to be doing this for a bit. So, hopefully you can catch up sooner rather than later, and then join the chat with everybody. But yes, thank you again. And also Emily Aarons became a new Bike Club member. Welcome to Bike Club. Thank you so much for supporting the YouTube channel. And I hope to see you on Friday for our casual members only live stream, where we just kind of hang out with the chat. Thank you. Okay. All right, let's continue with this delightful cross-examination.
Next question, please.
There was you had testified earlier about a problem with an oral report by Erik Menendez. Do you
Today-
recall that?
Yes. Today?
No.
Of course.
Basically, he cheated. Would that be fair to say?
Objection on cross speculation.
He did not follow the directions, and because he had a history of not following directions, I really didn't know if how much thought he had given to doing it the way he had done it.
And also Christian Williams, member for 1 month. Thank you so much for the member chat. Says this is the nicest chat in the world. Aw, wonderful. I love it. I love it. I love this community. I love how kind and generous everyone is. and how caring, even in disagreements. I love it.
It did not go to judiciary.
I'm sorry, what was
It
that?
did not go to judiciary. It went to the head of the upper school. And that was a judgment call on my part because of the time of year, and I wanted immediate follow-up because of the history of not understanding what he was to do. And my not understanding why he didn't understand. I couldn't find whatever it was that was getting in his way to help him get rid of that, to help him change that pattern.
Okay, the question is, did he plagiarize his oral report?
Yes.
Did you instruct him to copy a report out of an encyclopedia?
No.
In fact, when you recognized that he had cheated, you called his mother. Would that be fair to say?
I went to Erik, and I think he brought his mother in on it.
Okay.
Because she had responded before the end of that day.
Now, when you initially confronted the defendant with your belief that he had cheated, he had plagiarized, did he deny that he had done so?
Yes, he did.
So he said, no, I didn't cheat?
Yes.
And what did you do at that point?
I decided I would have to investigate it further.
And what did you do in that regard?
I went to the library and went to the World Book. And it was the first book I looked at.
How did you suspect that he had cheated?
I believe that was in what I said earlier. He did not, he mispronounced several of the words. He didn't seem to understand what was behind some of what he was saying. And it was also, he was clearly reading from cards rather than referring to cards.
And at that point, you confronted him with what you suspected about him cheating.
Objection passed.
I waited until after class, and I don't remember if it was directly after class or later in the day.
Okay, so did you ask him to stay after class so that
No.
you could talk to him?
No.
How did you confront him about this cheating?
I asked him if I said that I did not think that these were his words, and that I felt he hadn't done the assignment the way it was intended.
Now, when he denied that he had cheated, was it you that called Mrs. Menendez up for a meeting?
No, I don't believe I did.
Okay. You indicated that Mrs. Menendez was called at some point. Do you recall who called her?
No, I don't remember.
You had indicated that during this meeting with Mrs. Menendez that there was yourself, the defendant, his mother, and somebody named Bing.
Mr. Bing, Sanford Bing, who was the head of the upper school.
Now,
Are you sure it wasn't Chandler Bing? Sorry, I couldn't help myself. Could not help myself with a Friends reference. It is the 90s after all.
had you
His Erik's advisor was not there, and I don't know why.
had you gone to Mr. Bing to let him know that you had caught Erik Menendez cheating?
Yes, I went to Mr. Bing even later in the day to advise him of what had happened. And first I talked to Erik, then I had to do the library, then I had to go to Mr. Bing, and I had 3 other classes during the day also.
Now, was it that day that Mrs. Menendez came for this meeting?
No, it was not. It was
the next day?
the next day or the day after.
Do you know if Mr. Bing called up Mrs. Menendez?
No, I'm not sure. I believe he said that I don't remember.
Now, you had indicated that Mrs. Menendez was at first a little upset with you for accusing her son of cheating.
Objection misstates the evidence. She was a little upset.
Rephrase the question.
Was Mrs. Menendez a bit upset with you for accusing her son of
Love it,
cheating?
Peachy Patty Joe.
I had written 6 reports instead of, well, at that point 5 instead of 3. She felt that she said she felt that I was picking on Erik, that I had been on his case all year, that I was being unfair to him, and that he would not do something like that.
You would not cheat like that.
He would not do that.
Did Mrs. Menendez appear to be protective of her son?
Objection calls for speculation.
Yeah, that's speculating into what Kitty Menendez was thinking or feeling. So which no one has any way of knowing other than Kitty herself. And just because this is a very, very good point. To be fair, mispronouncing uncommon words, if he was a reader, is not necessarily a sign that he did not know the words outside of more context, of course. But I think her bringing it up is sideways. Yeah, I would have, I would have, to like round that out, I would have preferred to hear something along the lines of like, I also asked him if he knew what these words meant. Like could he describe what these words meant? Because if he's using words that he may not know how to pronounce, he may be familiar with how they are on a page on its own. Maybe he's been reading this word but hasn't been speaking this word with other people. Completely agree. I'm sure all of us have had an experience of like reading a word on a page and then not realizing, that you're mispronouncing it for so long. Like I remember reading Harry Potter. I think I got into like book 4 and I was like, someone was asking me like what was going on in like book 4 of Harry Potter. This was an adult and I was like, oh, Harry, Ron, and Hermione are like, doing something or other. And they were like, it's actually Hermione. And I was like, oh, I never would have known that. Everyone has had a moment like that at some point in their life, I think. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you are unfamiliar with that word. So I would have preferred for her to say something along the lines of like, to like round it out. It would have been like, do you know what this word means? Because if he's using a word that he doesn't know what it means, but he's just using it because he's seen it somewhere, that might be more of an indication of cheating. But it's yeah. So I agree. Okay.
At this meeting, when you presented evidence that Erik Menendez had in fact cheated, Mrs. Menendez became upset with her son.
That's correct.
Is that right? Now, the punishment for this was what?
Erik redid the report using 2 sources, using note cards, and he gave the report to me in my office, not to the whole class.
Had you had any other student in your class cheat such as that?
Objection, Your Honor, relevant.
Yeah, not relevant.
When Erik Menendez cried when he got these less than acceptable grades, did you feel sorry for him?
Objection, irrelevant.
I was really worried about his overall performance. I'm not sure that I'd call it feeling sorry for him. I was concerned about the level of anxiety. I was concerned that this seemed to be a pattern. And I was frustrated in that I couldn't help him find a strategy to be more successful, or several strategies.
And also, Christian Williams, thank you so much for gifting 1 Legal Bites membership. Very kind, very generous of you. We've got a few people gifting memberships today. And Mindy has been gifted a membership by Christian Williams. So welcome to Bite Club, Mindy. Hope to see you on Friday at the members only live stream.
Did his crying make you do things that you wouldn't do for other students?
Would you say that again?
Yes. Did the defendant's crying when he got bad grades, would that make you do something that you wouldn't do for other students? For example, you indicated that you allowed the defendant to redo his paper and give the oral report simply in front of you rather than in front of the whole class. I take it that was an exception.
It was my effort to have him go through the process of the assignment. The day school allows teachers that kind of latitude so that all of us teachers, I think, really do try to structure the class situation, the requirements of a course, so that they meet the individual needs of all our students. I have usually about 15 students in a classroom, which gives me time and space to be able to do that. But it often means, at least 12 variations on a theme, often for assignments and ways of responding to their responses. So I tried to find ways of putting less pressure while still demanding that he complete the things that were necessary for his development as a student.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Any redirect?
A couple questions, Your Honor.
Mrs. Howarth, Mr. Kuriyama read to you from a copy of a report about an interview. Have you had a chance to look at that report?
Yes, I did look at that.
Okay, and did you, in the interview, say that it's fairly common for ninth graders to be self-doubters?
Yes.
Okay, and did you also say as part of that same sentence, but Erik was an extreme case?
Yes.
Okay. And was Erik an extreme case of self-doubt?
Yes, of self-doubt and of anxiety.
Mr. Kuriyama asked you whether or not it was other students appeared to have their attention wander during your class. How would you characterize the degree of wandering that Erik did as opposed to your other students?
He frequently had trouble concentrating. That year, maybe there was one other, perhaps there were two other students in two ninth grade classes that I taught that might give me similar concern. But this combined with other things, I only wrote, I teach four upper school English. At that time, I was teaching 4 upper school English classes, and I believe I only wrote 3 interims for that first marking period. And then I wrote a second interim for Erik later in the year.
So that the things that you observed Erik doing, such as his attention wandering and his anxiety, were unusual,
That's correct.
taken together and individually. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Now, let me ask you about the incident where Erik copied the World Book. And you had a meeting with his mother. You said that Mr. Kuriyama asked you about the mother saying that you had been picking on Erik.
Objection misstates the evidence. Overruled.
Had you been picking on Erik during the course of this year, Mrs. Howard?
I wouldn't characterize it in that way. I tried to give Erik as much attention as I could to address the problems that he was having. I did write more reports on Erik than I did on other students to try to keep the parents informed. Um, um, his grades were not good,
Okay.
despite.
Did Mrs. Menendez ever express any resentment towards you for your comments?
No, nothing direct about the comments themselves.
What about Erik? Did you ever have any discussions with him about that he didn't like all these suggestions that you were making in his comments?
Objection, Youngster.
In conference, we would go over the comments and try to work on strategies that he could use so that the problems would not come up. We would,
That's not the question. Did he ever complain about your writing these comments?
no.
Did he appear to appreciate your efforts to help him?
Objection, calls for speculation.
Sustain.
Did he respond to your efforts to help him in these conferences? Did
He
he
would,
listen?
yes, and he was good about coming to conferences. And that was, again, particularly difficult because they
You
would,
answer the question.
yes.
Next question.
Okay.
getting
Was there
impatient.
ever any pattern to Erik's performance problems that you were able to discern?
No.
Objection, vague, Youngster.
Sustain.
Do you, as a teacher, do you, in students, observe certain recognizable patterns? That is, somebody who has trouble reading will display certain problems. Is it
Objection,
somewhat
calls for
predictable?
Calls for improper opinion.
All right, it's beyond the scope of the current examination. Anything else?
Perhaps. In your meeting with Mrs. Menendez, when she talked about dishonoring the family, did she say which family he was dishonoring? Is that the Menendez family?
She would, her words were the family name, the family honor. I had not heard that before.
Okay. All right, thank you. I have nothing further.
Anything else? Mr. Brown, thank you. You're excused. All right, we'll take a 15-minute recess, ladies and gentlemen. Don't discuss this case with anyone. Don't form any final opinions about it. And we'll resume at 20 minutes to the hour. That's the council.
There'll be a little bit of oral argument here. It's only a few minutes, so we'll actually
All
watch this.
right, as I indicated,
But first, Debbie Faison Cook, thank you so much for gifting One Legal Bites membership. So kind and so generous of you. And now Teresa has been gifted a membership by Debbie Faison Cook. Welcome, Teresa, to Bite Club, and hopefully you can join us on Friday for members only live stream. Okay. Now, Ardo. Now, this is the mostest important question of all. What is the name of the multicolored cat, and when can we get an emoji? Well, this one's just a visiting kitty. So I don't know if we'll be getting an emoji, but her name is Zoika. It's definitely a Lithuanian type of name. She's my aunt's cat. She is visiting for a little bit. I'm with my parents right now, so they already have 2 cats. So it's been interesting. But actually, it's been going better than I anticipated it would go by like adding in another cat. It helps that my parents' 2 cats are male cats. This is a female cat. Anyway, whatever. It's been going fairly well. She's a very sweet, calm, sociable cat too. So that also really helps. But yeah, we won't be adding an emoji for her, but she is just our visiting kitty. You'll probably see a bit more of her like walking back and forth on this desk as she likes to do. She seems to be asking for pets when she does that. Otherwise, you might see Fitzy from time to time, who is a hardy doppelganger. So we shall see. Well, he's not little. He's kind of big. American cats are pretty big. American domesticated cats are a bit bigger than I've seen them elsewhere. Yeah, they are very, very sweet kitties. And love it. And Dater, yeah, my family, that's our family background is Lithuanian. So a lot of our pets' names in the past have been Lithuanian type of names. And also there was another question earlier about a pet's name. Is Holmes named after Sherlock Holmes? He's actually, a lot of people think that because, especially because he's a very curious cat. He kind of gets into a lot of stuff. It's kind of funny, similar to Sherlock Holmes, but he was actually named after Oliver Wendell. What? If I can talk, Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., Supreme Court Justice, and the justice with the best whiskers in the history of the Supreme Court. Actually, I'll stop the screen from here really quick and I'll show you, and then I'll bring it back to our wonderful testimony here, just so that you can see here what I'm talking about. Look at those whiskers. Best whiskers ever, but also really, really big on, let's see, here we go. I'll zoom in. Also really big on free speech, jurisprudence, that kind of thing. So yeah, Holmes is definitely a free speech advocate because he likes to use his voice very often. And all right. So got that back. So yeah, like I said, best whiskers in the history of the Supreme Court. Okay, let's get back to, well, there will be a little bit of argument, probably about some testimony, and then we'll get to the next witness.
I wanted counsel to pinpoint your examination.
Also, sorry, there is another question here, a little bit unrelated, but we were talking about ADHD earlier. Can ADHD impulsiveness play a role in criminality or spur of the moment decisions? I'm not educated at all about it. Yes, 100%. So if you've ever heard Ian Runkle talk about his level of ADHD, he said that he has said before that he has his ADHD is so severe that he, like, doctors in the past have basically told him like he really should be in a prison because he has that level of ADHD. There tend to be high levels. I don't know if it's more men than women, but high levels of impulsivity. There's different, it can manifest in different ways, right? But impulsivity is one symptom of it. And so that can also create, a situation of criminality at times. But Ian, of course, has had a lot of all kinds of treatment since his childhood. So he's, thank goodness, has not done anything to land himself in prison. But that's been the kind of the refrain that he's mentioned a lot, due to his level of ADHD. But yeah.
And this last witness was a witness who repeated many things that we've heard already, and went over a lot of things that are cumulative. And the next witness or any other witnesses you're calling on these subjects had better be pinpointed and get to the specific issue that you want to bring out, rather than go through all the same litany of things we've heard with other witnesses.
I gotta say, I kind of agree with him here. The last, the last couple witnesses have been kind of like, okay, sure, helpful for the defense, but like, how much does it move the needle in comparison to what we've already heard? We've heard from quite a few teachers. We've heard from other people that were there during swim instructions, tennis instructions. Like the downside to using this many witnesses for the defense, like just thinking about this from a defense perspective, the downside to this is that over time, it's kind of acts as fluff, and it'll end up diluting the more powerful bits of testimony that we've heard that packed a lot of punch, right? Like Diane's testimony, their cousin, for example, other people where we heard things that we were just like, we had to pause for a second and talk about it. There have been some witnesses that we have heard from where we were like, holy crap, this changes everything. But over time, and again, we are doing this in smaller pieces over a longer period of time. This is spread out after a week. We do 3 to 4 hours once a week, which is different than what they're doing, which is like, up to 8 hours every single day. but that can still kind of run together when you've got all of that compacted into a smaller bit of time. You can still kind of forget things if you have enough witnesses that come in. It kind of dilutes the more important testimony. So you also don't want to do that, because then the jury might start forgetting the really important details that you really want them to remember. So it's like there's it's not just like this is like 100% benefiting the defense to do this way. I think, I'm always in favor of trying to keep things as precise as possible. And maybe it's just because I have a harder time paying attention for longer periods of time. But, I understand that, there's only so much that the human brain can remember. And I don't remember if in this courtroom, if they're allowing them to take notes, because I've heard some courtrooms that they don't want jurors, taking notes, because then that kind of becomes almost like a demonstrative in the courtroom. They're not allowed to take back with them into the jury deliberation room, right? um I don't know. Some courtrooms have different kinds of rules. I don't remember what they're allowing in this courtroom. um oh, they did allow jurors to take notes in this case, says Canberra. So that's good, because it's a very long very long trial. um so but yeah. Let's see. There was also, I think, a question here that I wanted to. Oh, yeah. Is there a limit? Thank you, Christian Williams. Is there a limit to how many witnesses an attorney can call? If it's more on time rather than the number of witnesses. I mean, they go through. They have a whole witness list that they provide a list of people that they, ahead of time, they have to provide it to the other side, that a list of people that they anticipate that they will be calling from. Unless, like, if you watch the Depp trial, sometimes you have a witness that comes forward because they hear about this thing happening. The legal team, didn't know about their existence, or wasn't able to contact them or something. And it's not until that person comes forward and makes contact with them, and then they realize, oh, we now have this person that we didn't have the ability to contact before. Let's bring them into the courtroom. Like, that's the only way that you can have like a surprise witness. If you see that on TV shows and movies and stuff, of like, oh, there's this surprise star witness, that's usually not the case. Like, it's everybody knows ahead of time who's going to be potentially called, right? Because you have a witness list ahead of time that you can call from. You don't have to call everybody from that list, but you just tell them, you give the other side notice of like, these are people that we intend to call. Whether we choose to or not is up to us, but fair warning. So there are, you can also object to certain witnesses being called up for, reasons of uh, um like replicability. I'm like brain farting on the word, but like where it starts to get repetitive. If you anticipate, like they'll kind of talk ahead of time of like what they anticipate that this person is going to talk about, that they're going to testify to. If there's nothing new that they're going to talk about that, can't it hasn't already come out of someone else. If there's nothing new, then especially over time, the other side can start to object, to say like, look, like, this is wasting the court's time, wasting the court's resources, because the longer that a case drags on, it's not just that it's costing the parties, the attorney's fees and things like that. It's also state resources, because it's also, I mean, here's a criminal case. So we've got, the DA's office is a state resource. That's taxpayer money. Same thing with the courtroom. Same thing with like all of the people that work in the courtroom, the judge, the clerk, the bailiff. And then that also impacts the other cases that are on this courtroom's docket. So it's like there's, oh no, my camera went out. What the heck? How did that happen? Hang on. Is this not? Oh, wait. What's going on here? Sorry. What's happening? What is happening here? Hang on. Also, my other screen. It's not the cat. Is this not plugged in? What's happening? Okay. I will have to change to the other Okay, so here's on my screen viewfinder. Yeah, the camera just told me that the battery was exhausted. I don't know. Don't know what happened there. But the battery's hang on one second. Actually, I'm gonna pause the screen here really quick so you don't see me all up in your face. That's so weird because the battery's plugged in. Okay. Now the battery's on. Okay, now it's plugged in. Yeah, so weird. Okay, hang on. Let's see, does this work? Okay, now we're back. Okay. Yeah, it could have been the cat. She was walking around at one point behind my laptop and behind this second screen here. So she may have kind of bumped one of these wires a bit and I maybe didn't notice that it unplugged this here. Okay. All right. Okay. And also this okay, here we go. We are back. I completely lost my train of thought. As it happens. But basically to kind of like tie that back to like the beginning of this whole long like side quest that I went down. Yeah, this is starting to feel a little bit repetitive. So I actually kind of agree with the judge here on this being repetitive and like let's not waste the court's resources here. Make sure that you've got a point that you've got to have a point here that the witness is going to be getting into. So and for those of you concerned about me blaming the cat, it's okay. Cats are agents of chaos. They relish in doing that. So she absolutely gives zero cares about the fact that I am blaming it on her. She's currently licking her paw right now. She's fine. She's totally fine. Okay. All right. Let's get back to it.
Witnesses. And the next witness falls in that same category, and any other witnesses you have along those lines, if any. You've indicated you don't have any, but again, when I say pinpoint, I mean that. You're just going over and regurgitating things that other witnesses already said. And it's cumulative and it's improper, and you should be aware of it as well. You must know when you ask these questions, you've heard these things before. They're nothing new. You've heard the same witnesses or other witnesses say the same thing. So at some point, even you will say enough is enough. Yes, I noticed Ms. Abramson's eyes wandering there. Okay, we'll be in recess until 22.
I was trying to get your attention to turn down the
All right, the jury and all parties are present. In the case of People versus Erik Menendez, the defense may call its next witness.
Ready with phone Norman Puls?
Step forward, please.
We're just going to do this for a bit.
Could you raise your right hand, please, to be sworn? So you solemnly swear that the testimony you may give in the cause now pending before this court should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please see you tell us your full name, spell your last.
The name is Norman. The last name is Puls. Puls.
All right, just lean back and the mic will pick up your voice.
Thank you.
Mr. Puls, do you work as a tutor?
I do.
And how long have you worked as a tutor?
About 13, 14 years now.
And is there any particular area that you teach students?
Yes, I tutor in all forms of mathematics and physics and chemistry.
Okay, and do you have any training, either education or on the job, that has prepared you to tutor students in these areas?
Yes, I have a bachelor's degree in engineering, a master's degree in engineering, and I have conducted and organized many industrial training programs.
And have you also worked as a consulting engineer for a period of time?
Yes, I have,
For how long?
since 1981.
Sounds like quite the person to have as a tutor.
Now, did you tutor Erik Menendez?
Yes, I did.
And when did you begin tutoring him?
The fall term of 1987,
And how long did you tutor him?
through his high school, into high school, which would have been about 2 years.
Okay, so you last worked with him in approximately June of 1989?
Yes, in the spring of 1989. That's
Okay,
right.
and the last spring that you worked with him would have been Erik's senior year in high school.
That's correct.
Now, where was Erik living at the time you first began tutoring him? Do you know?
No, not really.
Okay. How often did you tutor Erik?
Twice a week at least.
Okay, was-
Sometimes none if he was traveling.
All right. Normally, it was twice a week.
Normally it was twice a week, yes.
And you indicated that there were periods when you didn't tutor him at all during the week because he was traveling?
That's right.
Was he traveling for any particular purpose that you were aware of?
Tennis.
Yes, I was told it's for tennis, for tournaments or practice or whatever.
And how long would each session last?
Hour and a half at least.
Where were these tutoring sessions held?
In the Woodland Hills area.
Now, let me ask you, Mr. Puls, about
In LA, for anybody
to
that's not
describe
familiar.
Erik as a student. Did he seem to be interested in mathematics?
I think he had a reasonable interest in mathematics, yes.
And
Reasonable interest.
based on
I
your
think that seems like a nice way of putting it.
contacts with him, did he appear to try hard to learn?
I always thought so.
Okay. Did you notice any difficulties with Erik's attention span?
Yes.
What did you notice?
There were times when it was non-existent, times when he was spaced out. He would look at me and look right through me, and I would look at him and I realized there was nobody there behind the eyes. He was just not there. And other times he was in and sharp and brisk, and it would change in a matter of minutes sometimes.
Was this behavior that you saw in Erik unusual in your experience?
Yes.
And
That theory, could be. Issues and that being fluctuating too. There could be. There could be. Could be ADHD. Could be something else. But it hits a lot of buttons for my familiarity.
would you do anything to try and get Erik's attention?
Surely. I'd jump up and down and pound the table and make noise and shout and walk up and down and try different things to keep his focus on me. It was bad enough that other tutors in the same offices would pound on the walls and tell me to be quiet sometimes.
Now, in tutoring students, you sometimes encounter people who have problem concentrating or focusing. Is that correct?
I do, yes.
Was the problem that you observed Erik having something that was common among the students that you tutored?
The problem was common. However, in this case, it was exaggerated to a point I had never seen before or since.
Did you ever meet Mrs. Menendez, Erik's mother?
Yes, I did.
About how many times?
A small number of times.
Okay. And did you ever have any conversation with her about how Erik was doing or his progress?
I attempted to, after a session, if she would be there waiting to pick Erik up, or I would come over to her and begin to tell her how her son did. And I felt she had no interest.
What makes you say that she had, or what makes you feel that she had no interest?
Objection calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Did you ever meet Mr. Menendez?
Yes,
And approximately how many times did you meet him?
more than the mother, maybe 4, 5, 6 times.
And did you have any interaction with him about how Erik was doing?
Yes, I did.
And what type of interaction did you have with him?
Again, after the session, the father would approach and ask me, how did he do? Is he learning? Is he responding? He wouldn't get into detail because I don't think the father knew calculus or whatever. So he didn't want to know the details, but he did want to know whether we there at the tutoring organization was giving his boy his money's worth, and whether the boy was accepting what we were giving.
Was Erik accepting what you were giving?
About half the time.
And the time that he was, the half that he wasn't, was that because of this attention deficit that you've told us about?
Right, the total lack of, you go like this and nothing there behind the eyes. And that's when he was sharp, he was.
Also, if someone has, sorry, I'm totally interrupting here, but it could also be that somebody has an underlying condition that becomes more severe because of trauma. So there definitely could be a mixed bag of things going on here with Erik. Either way, it appears that he was having some major issues and he was not getting the help that he needed. So, regardless of how you see it, if what you think is the basis for these symptoms, these behaviors that he's showing in school and with his tutor, in these different environments, they obviously are symptoms of a problem that was not getting remediated in any sort of fashion.
He was a good student.
Thank you very much. I have nothing further.
Cross.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Puls, how much is it per session for these tutoring sessions?
Dollars?
Yes.
Well,
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
Overruled.
I was not the receiver of the money. I was employed by a tutoring organization. So the Menendez family paid the organization. The organization then paid me.
How much,
So I don't know what they got.
How much did you get paid?
I got
Objection,
$20.
relevance.
Overruled. Go ahead.
I believe it was $20 an hour.
For 1993, that's a lot more than
And you would meet with
today.
the defendant twice per week
On average, yes.
and about 3 hours per week, an hour and a half per session.
That's about it.
Would Mr. and Mrs. Menendez bring Erik Menendez to these tutoring sessions?
Only occasionally. Yes, occasionally.
And that's when you'd see the parents. And
That's right.
specifically, you saw Mr. Menendez, you said 4, 5, or 6 times.
That's right.
And Mr. Menendez asked you how his son was doing.
Yes.
Was it your understanding that Mr. Menendez traveled a lot in his business?
Objection, relevance.
Sustained.
The times that you did not see Mr. Menendez, was it Mrs. Menendez that would come?
Objection, Your Honor, misstates the testimony.
Why don't you rephrase the question?
How many times did you see Mrs. Menendez at your facility?
2, 3.
Would you send home progress reports to the family?
Not me. Maybe the school did, but I did not.
Do you know how the defendant was referred to this business?
Objection, relevant.
Sustained.
You indicated that you had tutored Erik Menendez for some year and a half. Is that correct?
I would say nearer to 2 years, but well, 2 school terms would be better put.
Before that, was he tutored by somebody else in the business?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for hearsay speculation. Personal knowledge.
Sustained.
Do you know a person at this business called Sally Jordan?
Yes,
Was she? Did you ever speak to Sally Jordan about Erik Menendez?
yes,
Was she also a math teacher?
no,
What did she teach?
English.
So this business, it was called Scholars Unlimited, is that
That's correct.
There were different disciplines that were being taught. There
That's
were
correct.
tutors for different disciplines.
That's
So-
correct.
And your specialty was in math and chemistry and physics, I believe you said?
That's right.
Did you tutor Erik Menendez on anything but math?
I think we got into physics one term.
Now, there were some occasions when Erik Menendez had to go on a tennis tournament, is that right?
That's what I was told, yes.
Now, that wouldn't happen very often, though, would it?
How often is very often? I think it happened often. I think it was a matter of at least every 3rd week or so, he would miss an appointment.
Would you call that an occasional miss?
It was more frequent than occasional, in my opinion.
Do you remember giving an interview in this case to the defense attorneys?
Yes, I did.
Would it refresh your present recollection to take a look at that report?
I did. I got a chance to see it. Sure. Oops.
The jury was
Okay,
not
that's
there
a
before
question
this
I can-
witness showed up. So sorry.
Well, does that refresh your present recollection?
Let me pause for a second. FB Sheik, was the jury there when the judge was saying that? I think you're referring to the judge making commentary about, this next witness needs to be, all of your upcoming witnesses, they need to be a little bit more precisely driven on a particular point that you need to be making. Um uh that the jury was not in the courtroom for that. So he has been pretty good about that kind of thing, about making sure that he's not giving commentary when the jury is present. For the most part, there may have been a couple sideways comments here and there, or no, there have been a few sideways comments, but something like that, like he sent them out first for like a 15-minute break and then made those comments, and now obviously the jury is back for this testimony.
Election.
It refreshes, but I don't believe it is. I don't believe it was transcribed correctly.
So you think this report is inaccurate?
In that sentence, yes.
Okay. Who did you speak to
Who are you talking about?
regarding this report?
Objection, relevance.
Overall.
Miss Leslie Abramson and that lady and her private investigator, Ederly, I can't remember the name, I'm sorry.
Cindy Erdely?
Cindy Ederly, that sounds correct,
Okay.
yes.
Did the defense give you a copy of this report to refresh your recollection before you testified today?
Yes,
Okay, so you've seen this report before?
yes, I have. If that's the 3-page one, yes, I've seen it.
This is a 3-page report.
Then that's the one I've seen.
Now, this report then says that you had indicated, or you reported that Erik Menendez occasionally missed his lessons because of conflicts with his tennis lessons, correct?
That's what it says, yes.
And what you're saying now is that the defense report is inaccurate?
I think so. I think it should be more than just occasionally. It should say frequently.
Did you bring that to the attention of the defense attorneys in this case
Objection.
when you read it?
Overruled. Your answer?
Yes, I mentioned that I thought it was a error in copying or transcribing or understanding or whatever. I didn't think it was major, though, because the difference between occasionally and frequently is it's a matter of degree.
I have nothing further, Your Honor.
All right, anything else?
Just one question. What about Mrs. Menendez's behavior caused you to think that she wasn't interested in how her son was doing?
Objection, Madam Secretary.
Sustained.
Mr. Kuriyama asked you about meeting Mrs. Menendez 2 to 3 times.
Yes, he did.
During the 2 to 3 times that you met with her, did you have conversations?
I tr-
Objection, ground scope.
Overruled to that question.
Did she speak to you?
Hardly at all. I attempted to speak to her and explain how her son was doing, and I got no response. And she.
All right, you've answered the question, sir.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
All right, anything else?
No further questions.
All right, thank you. You may step down. You're excused. Let me see counsel at the side.
All right, so we are going to go to the next section here for the next witness. But first, before we do, yeah, that last bit of impeachment there, Kuriyama wasn't really impeaching the witness so much as he was impeaching the defense there by saying, oh, so is the defense report on that bit inaccurate? Did you try to talk about, tell them that was inaccurate? Kuriyama's trying to make the defense look either like they're hiding something, like they're trying to hide something, or they're trying to skew things in a way that is unfair, inaccurate, improper. Whether or not that lands on the jury is another question, right? Because it's a difference between occasional versus frequent. But also what he's saying is it's the difference between, did Erik miss tutoring sessions due to tennis obligations occasionally or frequently? We all know that was not Erik's decision, right? Like there's no way that Erik was making that decision himself. That decision was made by his parents. Like that's entirely clear. There's no way he was making that decision for himself. So either way, it seems like it's a distinction without a difference, or a difference. Yeah, a distinction without a difference, right? It's like it really doesn't make any kind of a difference at the end of the day. But if you're the prosecution, it doesn't hurt to point out that the defense may have some things inaccurate. So yeah. Okay. Next one. Here we go. All right. So this is going to be Skip Lowe.
State your full name and spell your last name.
My name is Skip E. Initial Lowe, L-O-W-E.
Good morning, Mr. Lowe.
Good morning.
Mr. Lowe, directing your attention to 1989 in the spring to summer months, did you attend some sort of a function in Beverly Hills?
Yes, I did.
And what type of a function did you attend?
It was a black tie affair.
Okay, and was this a benefit for some particular?
Oh, Care Bear, thank you so much for this. I haven't seen this testimony and like the substance of this testimony. So, other than like the very beginning, to get some context as to who he is. So if there is some physical abuse that he's going to testify to, trigger warning for, we talk about all kinds of abuse in this case. So generally speaking, trigger warning on as to all witnesses potentially. But here it looks like this witness is going to be testifying to some physical abuse. So if that's tough for you, fair warning. At any point in any of this testimony, if you're having a hard time with any of it, we've got a lot of folks that have survived abuse themselves. So if any of it gets difficult, you feel free to take a step away, have a breather, put some feet on some grass, cuddle a fur buddy, anything that you need to sort of like recenter yourself and come back to it if you feel like you can and you want to, but zero obligation ever.
Organization?
Yes.
Do you recall what organization was going to profit or benefit from this event?
It was some sort of a Jewish organization. That's all I know. I don't know if it was the City of Hope or whatever. I don't remember.
All right. And where was it that this benefit was held?
At the Beverly Hilton Hotel.
Beverly Hilton?
Hilton. Mhm.
And are you able to recall the specific date that this benefit was held?
Around springtime, something like that.
Did you attend the benefit alone or with someone else?
I escorted a lady,
Ooh.
And who was that lady that you escorted?
the actress Mamie Van Doren.
Now, when you arrived
Mamie
at
Van
the
Doren. I am not familiar.
benefit, were you assigned a table to sit at?
Yes.
And did you know the people at the table, any of the people at the table at the time you arrived?
No.
How many people were assigned to your table?
I think about 10.
Do you know the names of any of them?
No.
Was there anyone assigned to the
Quick reference. Let me stop the screen real quick and then I will show you guys Mamie Van Doren from Wikipedia. Oops. This is who he's talking about. Born in that was her in 1956. So she is still living. Okay. Cool. I guess she lives in South Dakota now and she's 92 years old. He was escorting Miss Van Doren. Okay. Alrighty. Just for a little bit of reference for you guys, if you're not familiar with who Mamie Van Doren is, since she's not, she's not a currently acting celebrity in Hollywood. It looks like she's kind of from like that golden age era. Okay.
the table that you sat at that evening that you recognize today in court?
No, except the boys.
Okay. When you say the boys, are you referring to two individuals who are sitting at council table?
No, just here.
Okay. I'm standing in back of a young man in a green shirt. Do you recognize him as having been at the table?
Yes.
Okay. And there's also another young man who's wearing a green checked
Yes.
shirt.
Yes. Yes.
Do you recognize him
Yes.
as having been at the table? Now, were these two young men in the company of anyone else?
Their parents, mother and father.
And do you recall the seating arrangements? That is, who were you sitting next to?
I was sitting next to Mamie Van Doren, and they had a couple next to Mamie. And then Lyle, and then Erik, and then the father, and then the mother, and a Canadian couple, and myself.
Okay. So that Erik was sitting next to his father. Is that
Yes.
correct? And during the course of the evening, did you have an opportunity to observe interaction between the two brothers and their parents?
Yes.
During the course of the evening, did something unusual happen involving Mr. Menendez and one of his sons?
Yes.
Which son was involved in this incident?
Erik.
And what particularly did you see that happened?
Mamie Van Doren was talking to the father, and the father was talking to Mamie, and all of a sudden, Erik wanted to say something to Mamie Van Doren, and the father interrupted him and pinched him real hard in the arm and told him to shut up, dummy, I'm talking to you. And
Oh, geez.
and the boy just stopped, and Mamie and I looked at each other, and
All right, you finished the question.
All right, let me ask you another question. What tone of voice did Mr. Menendez use when he said, "Shut up, dummy"?
Very harsh and loud.
And when you say that he pinched Erik, could you tell us what specifically he did?
In the arm.
Okay,
Real
you're
hard.
indicating the upper arm area.
Yes, something like that.
Did Erik react in any way to what his father did or said?
He turned red and didn't say a word and put his head down and took the fork and played with food.
Now, were you able to see whether or not Mrs. Menendez had any reaction to this incident? Did she
It's so
respond?
sad.
She was talking to the Canadian couple next to her, and she seemed like she heard it.
Objection sustained. The answer is stricken.
Did Mrs. Menendez do anything or say anything that made you think that she had heard what her husband had said?
Seemed like she was out of it to me.
Okay, what do you mean when she seems like it was?
It didn't mean anything to her. It just didn't mean anything.
Objection sustained. The answer is stricken.
Yeah,
Was there anything unusual that you saw that evening about?
because like he can testify to like what he observed. Like, you know, she looked up from her conversation and looked at, you know, Mamie Van Doren, or looked at Jose, or looked at Erik. You know, like he could testify to that kind of thing. But for him to say like it had no meaning to her, like he can't exactly say that because he doesn't know what's going on inside her brain. So that is a proper speculation objection. And yeah, Kerber, I agree. That mic needs a pop filter. That's been like this entire time. It's especially difficult with witnesses that are naturally soft spoken, so they have to go closer to the mic. But that means that you also pick up all of the breath and all of the popping, you know. Sorry guys. I hope that wasn't this is a much better mic than what they have in the courtroom, but I hope that wasn't too much for you guys. But you know, yeah, it's already, I mean, geez, like what, like that doesn't need to happen. You know, you're at a public thing. Your son wants to talk to this person because he has an interest in talking to her. You know, I'm kind of curious if it's, you know, it looked like he had an interest in performance, in acting. So, you know, maybe he was interested in talking to her as somebody who was a very well-known star at the time, or at a time, you could say, that I don't know. It's just terrible. It's just bad. Like, what is the point, you know, in doing that? It's also like, if they were so concerned about their reputation, Jose and Kitty, like, why do things like that? You know, because that's going to impact your reputation, is how people see you, is how you openly treat your children in front of other people. Ugh, okay. Anyway, let's continue.
About Mrs. Menendez's behavior.
Sustained.
But how long was it that you were at this benefit at the table with the Menendez family?
How long? I'm sorry. How long?
How long were you there that evening? Was it an
Not very
hour?
long. Not very long at all.
And after this incident occurred with Mr. Menendez and his son Erik, were you able to see how both brothers acted?
I think Lyle was a little embarrassed.
Speculation.
Sustained. Answer stricken.
Did Lyle do or say anything after this incident?
No, not at all. Neither of them.
Pardon?
Neither of them did.
Yeah, if you just back up, it would be.
Oh,
okay.
I'm sorry. Forgive me.
So you get a little too close.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Thank you. I'm an entertainer. I have projection. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, just don't project so close.
Thank
to
you.
the
Thank you.
Now, let me ask you to focus on the interaction between the two brothers that you saw that evening.
Right.
Could you describe how they were acting?
Can you be more specific, please?
Yes. Could you describe the demeanor of the two brothers subsequent to the incident, which involved Mr. Menendez pinching his son and telling him to shut up?
It seemed like the father wanted to talk to Mamie Van Dorn.
Sustain.
Okay.
Answer straight.
All right. I'm focusing on the
Okay.
period of time after
Right.
this incident with the father
Right.
pinching Erik.
The mother got up and left about 10 minutes after, went to the bathroom.
And when she left to go to the bathroom, did she come back within a short period of time?
No, we didn't stay.
Okay. How long after the mother left to go to the bathroom did you then leave?
The father got up about 10, 15 minutes after, looking for her, evidently, I think. And Mamie and I just got up because she lived in Newport Beach, and she wanted to get home, and she thought the
little
whole
bit of a
thing was
drive.
very heavy.
Your Honor, move to strike comments of Mamie Van Dorn as being hearsay.
Sorry.
All right, the portion of the answer, starting with she thought and everything thereafter is stricken as hearsay and non-responsive.
All right. You said about 10 minutes after Mrs. Menendez left the table, Mr. Menendez got up as well.
Yes.
And at that point, did you leave?
Immediately, we just said goodnight, got up, and the two boys were the only ones at the table, got up and stood for Mamie and I to leave. The Canadian couple did not, and the other two couples weren't around, so we just left.
Okay,
We said
and
thank you.
why did you leave at that point in time?
Objection irrelevant.
Sustain.
Was there anything that had happened during the dinner which caused you to leave? At
Very
that point in time?
uncomfortable.
Excuse me, objection irrelevant, move to strike the answer.
Objection sustained, the answer straight.
Let me ask you for a moment, Mr. Lowe, about the
I mean, she could ask, like, how did this interaction or this, encounter leave any kind of an emotional impression on you, or like, how did this make you feel being in the presence of this? Like, you could ask that to try to get, like, I understand what she's trying to get at. And when you are the attorney in the moment doing it, it is so much harder than sitting where I'm sitting and thinking like, oh, like, like, here's the question that you need. So yeah, but it's trying to get there.
how Mr. and Mrs. Menendez were acting towards one another during the course of the evening that you were able to observe.
She was talking to the Canadian couple mostly. She wasn't talking to her husband at all.
Okay, did there appear to be any tension between Mr. and Mrs. Menendez?
Objection irrelevant.
Sustained.
Was there anything unusual about their interaction that you remember now that occurred in front of the two boys?
Objection irrelevant.
Did you have something that you wanted to be heard about at the sidebar?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, she's
Your
trying to
Honor, I
get it.
have no additional questions at this time.
All right, any
So
cross-examination?
she lost.
Oh, I'm sorry, sure.
Thank you.
So she lost on that objection. There was probably something very specific that she wanted to get at, which was, some kind of an interaction between Jose and Kitty, but it may have been because of speculation or some other reason that she wasn't able to ask the witness that particular question. But something that happened here seems to have made him and Mamie Van Doren feel uncomfortable. And from what we've heard previously, little bits and pieces, there's been a breadcrumb trail about Kitty always being suspicious of Jose cheating. My brain went, I don't know if the jury did this, but my brain went to, Maybe Jose was talking to Mamie Van Doren because he was very interested in her. If she was, in her, I mean, this was 30 years ago now, right? Yeah, 30 years ago now. So if she's 92, that means she was probably 62 or ish, so actually younger, maybe in her late 50s at the time. So, a bit younger than she is today. Maybe he was showing a certain kind of interest in her, and Kitty was not happy about that, and that's why she got up and went to the bathroom and just kind of stormed off or something. Could be. And maybe that's also why he really didn't want Erik talking to him. Possibly. I don't know. But there's a little bit that we're not going to get some information, but we'll see what happens on cross-examination.
Thank you. Mr. Lowe, you said this incident occurred in the spring of '89?
Around something like
Is
that.
that your best approximation?
Yes, it is.
All right. And when the comment was made and Mr. Menendez was pinching Erik, what was Lyle doing at that point when that took place?
I really can't remember. I just noticed the pinch, and I noticed the reaction of the young man, and I don't know.
And what was the reaction, if any, of Lyle Menendez right after
There
this
you go.
happened, if you saw?
No, it wasn't.
All right, did you see any reaction?
Not quite, not really. I think it was
Okay,
kind of
you've answered the question.
Sorry, sir.
And after the incident took place, was there any visible reaction up to the point in time when you left by Lyle Menendez?
He seemed kind of sad. He seemed like it happened before. It seemed like he's.
Your Honor, move to strike seemed like it happened before, being pure speculation on the part of the court.
Objection sustained. That portion of the answer is stricken.
Did Lyle Menendez express
Kind of borderline.
surprise, like that was something out
No.
of the ordinary?
No.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Cross-examination.
Mr. Lowe, you had never seen any of these people before that night, correct?
No, ma'am.
So you don't know what
Wait, yes or no? Had you ever
I'm
seen
sorry.
them before?
I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's not
No,
your
sir.
fault. It's
I'm
the way the
sorry.
question was asked.
No, sir.
All
No,
right.
you have not.
No, I have not.
Okay.
All right, so you don't know how these people behaved on any other night except for the night that you saw them, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
How was that you were contacted by the defense to testify in this case? Did you call someone or did someone call you?
I called somebody.
And when was it that you called someone in regards to being a witness in this case, Mr.
After
Lowe?
seeing it on TV.
I saw a tennis player on your court, and then after I saw the tennis player, then I realized the two boys we knew. We didn't know it. I didn't know it until then. And then Mamie called me, and then we talked on the phone, and then that's it. And then I felt very, very sad what happened at the table. I remember the whole incident, and she does too. And so that's what happened.
All right,
And
so then
So I called the attorney to let her know.
and you've been following the case on television?
Definitely not. The
Well-
only case I've seen is the tennis player. I don't know what is happening here.
All right, but it
Oh.
was seeing something on television that made you recall this event and contact the defense. Is that correct?
No, Mamie Van Doren told me before, a long time ago when it happened, but I didn't contact the whole thing until I felt with the tennis player he was on.
And you contacted the defense to be
That's when I
witness.
did it, yes. Mhm.
And so now you say you're an entertainer, sir?
Yes, I have a talk show, a talk celebrity show.
Okay, and you're aware of
That's where I brought Mamie Van Doren that night. Go ahead.
and you're aware of the fact that this is being televised. Is that correct? Are you aware of
Overall,
the fact that these proceedings are being televised?
No, I do not.
Thank you.
I just know
Trying
I've
to
seen it on TV.
Trying to get at are you trying to get publicity?
Just one question. Mr. Lowe, did you come forward because you wanted to be on television?
Definitely not. Definitely not. I'm on television every day. If you turn channel and cables, I'm on every day. So I don't need to be here. I thought I had something to say.
Oh yeah.
You
does have a
indicated that Ms. Van Doren contacted you at some point after the news of the Menendez parents' death occurred to remind you of this. Is that correct?
Certainly did.
And was it right after the news of the parents' deaths that she first contacted you about the incident?
Yes.
Excuse me. Okay, and the tennis player that you referred to, is that a witness who testified in this case?
Said yes?
Yes, yes.
All right. Thank
I'm
you
sorry.
very much. I have nothing further.
All right, thank you, sir. You're excused.
Interesting. Okay, really quick. Now that he's finished testifying, I will show his Wikipedia page. There's no picture of him on the Wikipedia page though, but it says so he apparently sadly passed in September 2014. But so his name was actually Sammy LaBella. But he was better known by his stage name, Skip E. Lowe. He was an American stand-up comedian, talk show host, and actor. Interesting. So he was, before adopting his now familiar stage name, LaBella worked as a stand-up comic, impressionist, and master of ceremonies. Okay. Beginning in 1978, he hosted Skip E. Lowe Looks at Hollywood, a weekly talk show for public access cable television that aired in Los Angeles and New York City. Oh, that's so interesting. Okay. Little bit of a side quest here, but oh, he died from emphysema. Oh, that's so sad. According to his former website, Lowe was cremated and had his ashes scattered at Ventura Pier on November 23rd, 2014. That's not entirely legal, but okay. It's supposed to be 3 nautical miles off the coast, but I mean, so sue him, right? I mean, he didn't do it. It was other people that did. Okay. Anyway, that was back in 2014. Statute of limitations is probably over at this point. Anyway, random bits of information that nobody needs. Okay, let's get back to testimony. We've got 2 more witnesses coming right up. And then, okay, but first there's going to be a few more minutes of chitter chatter in between witnesses.
And the next witness would be a witness testifying before the Erik Menendez jury only. Is that right?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. As far as the Lyle Menendez jury is concerned, I'll excuse you until 11 o'clock and ask that you report back to your jury room at 11. Don't discuss this case with anyone. Don't form any final opinions about it. And if you return to the jury room at 11 o'clock, I'll give you more information shortly thereafter as far as our schedule is concerned. But we'll ask that you return at 11 o'clock. And are you ready with your next witness? Okay. Did you wish to call that next witness?
Well, I would have preferred to have a short break before I call that next witness.
Do you need a break? Okay. All right, let's take a break then and let council get organized here. And we'll have you all back at 20 minutes to the hour. Don't discuss the case with anyone or form any final opinions about it. We'll see you back here at 20 minutes to. The clerk indicates there's some matter before the next witness testifies.
777 to exclude a potential witness. That witness being Catharina Cohen, who has testified already for the defense. Her daughter is proposed to testify at this juncture. I'm asking that this previous witness, Catharina Cohen, be excluded during Katie Whalen's testimony.
Your Honor, we object to that because the purpose of the exclusion orders here was not to shield people from hearing other people's testimony, since it's televised in its entirety. So I don't see any purpose for the exclusion order. Other witnesses, once they've testified, have been allowed to be in the courtroom. This whole testimony is going to take 10 minutes, and the mother would like to be here while her daughter testifies.
Do you intend to call Mrs. Cohen back?
She may be a witness.
Well, he doesn't
All right.
have any such intention, Your Honor. I think it's a
Well,
ruse.
counsel, I don't see this as such a major issue. If the people indicate they intend possibly to call this witness back, then I'll have her leave the courtroom. It's not a big problem. And Mrs. Cohen, if you would just wait outside while the witness is testifying.
Interesting, because none of the other witnesses have been excluded from the courtroom prior to this. That's a weird response. I from, if you're looking at this from the defense perspective, there could be a number of reasons why they would want mom to be allowed to be in the courtroom. This is a very intimidating court case. Maybe her daughter is nervous and will be more comfortable having her mother there as support. But I mean, maybe her dad's there too. I don't know. But like other witnesses have testified to like seeing testimony on TV. So it's like, I don't see why mom needs to be excluded for 10 minutes when she's already testified. Like if she's going to testify to something that is related to, I don't know. I feel like there would be some kind of consistency or inconsistency with her own testimony prior anyway. I don't know. That's a weird response by the judge based on what he's decided for other witnesses in the past.
All right, are we ready to proceed then?
Yes,
Okay, let's get the jury out.
they're going to stay here, right? Deputy
Yeah.
Wil-
The jurors are all back. You may call your next witness.
Katie Whalen, Your Honor.
All right.
Raise your right hand, please. You solemnly swear that the testimony you may give in the cause now pending before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. Tell us your full name and spell your last.
Catharina Josephine Whalen, Whalen.
Could you spell your first name, please?
Catharina.
Do people call you Katie?
Yes.
Okay, Miss Whalen, are you related to Kevin Casey Whalen?
Yes.
And are you related to Kathleen Cohen?
Yes.
Who are they?
Mrs. Cohen is my mom, and Casey Whalen is my brother.
And are you acquainted with Erik Menendez, my client?
Yes.
Do you recall a time in 1989 when Erik Menendez stayed at your home?
Yes.
And was this following the death of his parents?
Yes.
Do you remember the first night that Erik stayed at your home?
Yes.
And do you recall whether or not you were at dinner with Erik that night?
Yes.
And were you?
Yes, I was there.
And who else was present at dinner?
My brother and my mom.
And
And
yourself?
Erik and Erik and myself.
And do you recall where the dinner was?
We ate at La Paz. It's a Mexican restaurant in the valley.
And to the best of your knowledge, had Erik arrived in Los Angeles that day?
Yes.
Now, do you recall at dinner whether or not there was a conversation between Casey and Erik having to do with events of that day?
Yes.
Overrule, the answer will stand.
Now, do you recall Erik talking?
Yes.
And can you tell us what it was that Erik was talking about?
Sustained.
Your Honor, this is not being offered for the truth.
Then it's irrelevant.
Well, I'd like to be heard.
All right, you may.
Thank you.
Is this about,
Court reverses its ruling and
There you
may
go.
proceed with the question.
all
Thank you. I'd like
right.
to rephrase the question.
All right.
So just a little bit of a recap of what just happened. There was she's asking about what did Erik say in this conversation at dinner, talking out of court. So we've got an out of court statement. So the question is it hearsay or is it not hearsay? And the question is, why is it being offered in court? Is it being offered for the truth of the matter asserted in the statement, for, that Erik says, I was driving down the highway, to say he was actually driving down the highway? Or is there some other purpose, like, to the impact on the listener, for example, like the witness, like, the impact on her about what she heard? Or is there some other kind of like circumstantial reason that they want to admit this, other than for the truth of what he actually said? So the court reversed the ruling, but it sounds like she's going to have to rephrase the question from the way that she originally phrased it.
Ms. Whalen, you don't recall exactly what was said at the dinner, is that correct?
That is correct.
You recall, however, certain words that Erik said about the subject matter, in other words, of the conversation?
Yes.
And would you tell the jury what the words were that you recall?
Well, my brother and Erik were speaking. I recall.
Not your brother and you, what Erik had said at
Okay.
dinner.
There was mention of a will, and there was mention of Lyle, and the will having to do with a computer.
Okay. And that was the subject matter of the conversation that you overheard at dinner?
Yes.
Now, over the next few days, did Erik stay at your home?
Yes.
And specifically that, by the way, do you recall what night this dinner was, what day of the week?
I believe it was a Friday.
And did Erik sleep over at your house that Friday night?
Yes.
Did he sleep at your house that Saturday, the following Saturday?
Yes.
And the Sunday?
Yes.
And do you know if that was a holiday weekend?
It was, I think maybe it was Labor Day. I mean, the first weekend in September.
And do you recall if your brother left for school following that holiday weekend?
Yes.
And until the time that your brother left for school, do you recall whether or not Erik slept at your house each night?
Yes.
And did he?
Yes.
Now, after your brother left for school, do you recall a particular night when you were downstairs doing something with your stepdad?
Yes.
And would you tell us what were you doing?
We were just about to watch a movie, and I believe my mom wasn't home, and Erik was upstairs in my brother's room.
Okay. And when you say we were about to watch a movie, that was yourself and who else?
My stepfather.
That's Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
And did you do something did you do something at that point?
Yeah.
Irrelevant.
Overall.
You may answer.
I went upstairs and I knocked on the door to my brother's room, and there was no response. And I knocked again, and I said Erik, and there was no response. And so I opened the door.
And what did you see when you opened the door?
Erik was lying down on the bed, just like staring at the ceiling, almost asleep with his eyes open.
Did you say something to him?
Yeah, I called his name again.
And did he respond?
No, and I finally just touched the bed, and I think it shook him, and he just sat up and looked at me, and I asked him if he would like to watch the movie with us, and he said he was going to sleep.
When you saw him, though, in the bed, his eyes were open?
Mm-hmm.
How could you tell? Was the lights on in the room or off?
Yeah, there was a dim light in the corner of the room.
Now, some months later, did you become aware that Erik and his brother Lyle had been arrested?
Yes.
And do you recall a time when you accompanied your brother to the county jail to visit Erik?
Yes.
And do you have any idea about when that was?
My brother returned from Connecticut on May 21st, so I believe it was maybe the 25th or the before Memorial Day.
And did you go to the jail just with your brother?
Yes.
Did you meet anyone related to Erik when you got to the jail?
Yes, his grandmother.
And when you had your visit with Erik, was his grandmother close by?
Yes, she was standing. Lyle and Erik were next to each other, and she was standing near Lyle.
So both brothers were present for the visit time?
Yes, at different windows.
At different windows?
Yeah, like where you can speak.
To speak on a telephone?
Yes.
Did you visit with Lyle at all?
No.
And with respect to the visit with Erik, physically, how was it arranged for two people to visit one person at the jail?
Two people couldn't sit, but one person could sit and another person could stand. There was enough space for either myself to be sitting and Casey to be standing, or vice versa.
And for most of the visit, do you know if you were talking to Erik on the phone or was Casey?
Most of the time, Casey was speaking on the phone, sitting.
And were you standing right behind him?
Yes.
And could you hear what Casey was saying?
Yes.
And do you recall whether or not Casey was saying anything about any facts relating to this case?
I don't recall that he did.
Do you remember what he was talking about?
It was. I just remember asking him speaking to Erik about how Erik was and what it was like, and
what it was like in jail?
Yes.
And did you speak to Erik briefly yourself over the phone?
Yes.
And did you and Erik discuss any facts about his case?
No.
Do you recall at some point that your brother wrote a note?
Yes.
And what did he do with the note after he wrote it?
I suppose he put it in his pocket. There was the glass, and he wrote it and just turned it around and put it on the glass.
I'd like to approach the witness, Your Honor, with Exhibit 215.
Yes.
Asking you to look at this piece of paper. Do you know if you've ever seen that piece of paper before?
Yes,
Where have you seen it?
at the jail and the other night when my brother was cleaning out his drawers and we found it.
And was it crumpled up inside your brother's drawer?
No, he was cleaning and we looked at it and it was kind of ironic because he was home to stand on to come to trial and he just threw it away. And then when, we remembered it and we decided that it was important to bring.
You say he threw it away?
I believe he crumpled it and just put it in his bedroom in a trash can.
Okay, and then he retrieved it from there?
Yes.
It had been in his drawer?
Yes, it was in his drawer for 3 years.
Now, during the time, did Erik remain at your home and spend nights at your home after your brother went back to school?
Yes.
And during the time that Erik was at your home, did you ever receive any phone calls, someone asking for Erik?
Yes.
And did you recognize the voice in the phone calls?
No.
Was it male or female?
Male.
And did that person identify himself in any way as a relative of Erik's?
No.
And did the person merely ask if Erik was there?
Yes.
And do you recall if these calls came in on the line you shared with your brother or on your parents' line?
I believe it was the line I share with Casey.
And would you give us the last 4 digits of that line?
0313.
I have nothing further than that.
Cross-examination.
Ms. Whalen, did you testify that your brother crumpled up this sheet of paper the night before he came in to testify?
I don't think it was the night before.
When was that you saw this piece of paper?
He had come home in August because he thought he was going to have to be on trial then. And right before he left to go back to school, he cleaned it out then, and then he returned a week later to come.
So August when?
Maybe the 16th or 17th.
And is that when he was cleaning out his room?
I think so.
And were you with him cleaning out the room?
Just for a minute, I came upstairs to ask him something, and I saw what he was doing.
At that time, did you see this letter?
Yes.
And did you have a discussion with your brother about this letter at that time, August 16th?
Yeah, he opened it and said, oh my gosh, this is from when we went to the jail. And I looked at it and I agreed with him, and it didn't seem to serve a purpose for anything, so he threw it out.
Okay, so on August 16th, he crumpled it up and threw it out?
I believe so.
Okay.
I don't know if it was August 16th for sure, but
That's the best
yes.
recollection is that he threw it out on the 16th of August. And did you help him clean up that day?
I went through one drawer.
And he was going through his other drawers?
Yeah, he has a desk and a dresser. And
Did he throw away some other things that day?
yeah, some letters from people and
just tossed them in the wastebasket?
to the best of my recollection, yes.
Okay.
Or a trash bag.
Now, do you remember the specific date that Erik Menendez, the defendant in this case, came to your house after the murders of his parents?
I believe it was September 1st.
How do you remember that specific date?
Because I look back and I had a calendar that said when I worked. I just started a job then at the end of the summer of 1989. And on September 1st, I worked from 6 to 9. And they picked me up at work.
6 to 9 at night?
Yeah, I believe.
And who picked you up from work?
Well, my mom and my brother and Erik were in the car.
And where were you working at that point?
Calabasas Yogurt and Video.
And after they picked you up, the three of them, you then went to dinner?
Yes.
Did you check your records to see if you had been working on August 31st?
Yes, and I hadn't, because I had gotten the job on the 27th or the 28th of August, and that was my first day working.
Did you have a car at that time?
No,
Which car did they come in to pick you up?
my mom's car.
Did Erik Menendez have a car?
With him at that time?
Yes.
Not when they picked me up, because I live like 5 miles away from where I worked, so they didn't need 2 cars.
On that night, did you see Erik Menendez's car?
I do not remember.
Okay, do you remember seeing his car at any point during his stay at your house?
Oh, yes, for sure.
But you don't remember whether he had it on that particular night?
I don't believe he had it there that night, but when we got home, it was dark, so I don't know. I don't think it was there, but I don't remember.
You testified as to some phone calls that were made to your house on the 0313 number. Erik Menendez was a good friend of your brother's, wasn't he?
Yes.
And you had received calls from Erik Menendez at that number previously, had you not?
Yes.
And you had taken calls because it was your number as well, and he would ask for Casey.
Yes.
And during the period of time when he stayed at your house after the murders, did you receive some calls on your line?
Objection, Your Honor, vague.
From who?
From Erik Menendez.
You can ask the question.
You
understand the question?
Yes. You want to know if he called my
Yes.
house? I don't recall if he called my house while he was staying at my house.
Okay, during the period of time from September through March of 1990, prior to the defendant being arrested, did you receive any calls from him at that number?
I don't know. I don't remember. I don't believe that anyone would call if Casey wasn't there. Casey was at Santa Barbara.
Until when?
Until he left after Christmas of his first semester there and went to Connecticut. So I don't think Erik would be calling my house while Casey was away, necessarily.
Was the defendant a friend of yours as well?
No, I wouldn't say we became friends on our own. I became friends with him because he was friends with my brother.
Did your brother come back to visit your family in March of 1990?
In March, I think he left in the end of January for Connecticut and drove across country in May.
So sorry, I'm interrupting a little bit here. There's a question about why are there questions about Erik calling the house when he's supposed to be staying at the house? It's like kind of weird. What the prosecution I think is getting at here is that bit of information conflicts with the testimony from the Whalen family that he was staying with them at the time. So they are all testifying that Erik was staying with the Whalen family. You know, he landed in Los Angeles. Casey picked him up, took him to the Whalen house. They all had dinner together. They went to La Paz, this Mexican restaurant out in the valley. Then, he stayed with them. Casey even went to school in Santa Barbara. He stayed with the Whalen family even after Casey left for a little bit. It's not all that uncommon. It might seem a little strange that like the friend leaves and then Erik like stays with his friend's family. But remember, like they might be thinking, hey, look, this kid just lost both of his parents and in a very horrific, traumatic way. So, let's let him stay for as long as he needs because he's been through a lot. He's going through a lot right now. I can see some families being like, no, like come with us, So that's not all that strange to me. But I think what the prosecution is saying here is no. There are phone calls that have been made from the Menendez house to the Whalen house. This is Erik calling the Whalens from the Menendez house. So he's not really staying with the Whalens. They're all covering for him for some reason. I don't get that impression from them. They seem pretty truthful to me. There could be other explanations for why the Menendez family house number is calling the Whalen family number. There are security guards that are at the Menendez house. There are, they could be checking in on him. There could be other explanations for that. But the prosecution just seems to be bringing this up a number of times for that. Um, so, but anyway, that's what it appears to me for in terms of like why the prosecution is even asking about that in the first place.
I don't recall him being there at spring break.
Now, in May, he came home. Casey Whalen came home, is that correct?
Yes.
And it was during May that you and your brother went to see Erik Menendez at the jail.
Yes.
And do you remember what day that was?
I believe it had to be after May 21st
And why do you say that?
because Casey got home on May 21st.
Do you remember what sort of notebook your brother had with him on the date that you and your brother went to see Erik Menendez in jail?
Objection, Your Honor, assumes facts not in evidence.
Rephrase the question, please.
Yeah. Do you remember whether or not your brother had a notebook with him with a pen on the date that you and your brother went to visit Erik Menendez?
I don't believe he had a notebook with him.
What did he have with him?
His driver's license, car keys. I don't remember him having any objects in his hand.
Okay.
Besides
Did you have any objects in your hand?
No, the parking garage ticket in my pocket. I didn't have it in my hand. I mean,
Now, when your brother wrote a note that he wanted to keep secret and he put the note up on the glass to show to Erik Menendez, where did he get the paper?
I don't know. There was people next to us on either side. I believe he borrowed it from someone next to him.
Did he have to borrow a pen as well?
Yes.
Do you know who that person was next to him?
No. I believe the grandmother was talking to Lyle and someone else. I don't recall who was talking to Lyle. And I don't know who was to our right.
So Lyle and Erik Menendez were side by side while you visited with Erik Menendez. Is that yes?
Yes. Sorry.
And the grandmother was talking to Lyle while you and your brother were talking to Erik Menendez?
Yes.
Is that right? Now, you've testified that Erik Menendez slept over your house every night that he was there from when he first arrived until he left about a week after Casey left for school. Is that correct?
Objection, Your Honor, misstates the testimony.
Rephrase the question, please.
Well, why don't you tell us? Did Erik Menendez sleep over your house every night from the first night that he arrived?
I believe he stayed there every night that he was at my house, but I didn't check his bed at night.
So you don't know where he was every single night. Would that be fair to say?
Most nights I recall him being at my house, but I can't say that he was what time he slept or.
Now, you've testified in direct examination that he slept Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night, Monday night until Casey
left on Tuesday.
Now, that wasn't quite right. There were nights that you didn't know whether he was there. Is that fair to say?
Objection, argumentative.
Rephrase the question.
Would it be fair to say that you really don't know whether he was there every night?
Oh, well, the question I answered that he stayed there almost every night the whole time he was there. He was there for a few days after Casey left. And after Casey left, I wasn't watching after him. I mean, my brother wasn't around to be with Erik.
You had to watch after Erik Menendez?
No, I'm saying we were not watching after him.
Okay, he can come and go as he pleased, correct? He was an adult.
Right.
And he would go out and take his car out and do whatever he wanted to do, and Casey would do likewise as with his own friends. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
And you were working yourself, and you weren't watching what Erik Menendez was doing, were you?
I only worked that Friday of September 1st, and I don't think I worked the other days that my brother was home.
Okay, but fair to say that you have your own friends and you weren't babysitting Erik Menendez?
Yes.
You know, like I get the point that he's trying to make is like you don't actually know for certain. Like you can't say that you absolutely know that he was in his bed at night. And she's like, yeah, like I wasn't checking his bed. That would be weird, right? So, but it's, you know, it's interesting to see the way that they kind of end up sort of like talking across each other sometimes in these instances. Like he has one interest and then she is representing another, whether she has an interest or not. But I don't know. It's just interesting.
Do you recall receiving any phone calls from Erik Menendez from May of 1990 to the present on your 0313 number?
From jail?
Yes.
Not that I recall. I left for boarding school though in July of 1990, so I wasn't there for a good portion of the time.
Have you been out of the house continuously since July of 1990?
Yes, I just graduated in June of 93, and I was home summers and all vacations.
Well, during the summers since this May of 1990 that you were actually home, you still had that number, that 031?
No, it was cut off when I left for boarding school because Casey had left for school, and then when he returned, he just used my parents' line.
Okay.
I think it might have been done right when I left for boarding school, but sometime around July of 1990.
What are the last four digits of the main line to the house? Your Honor, at this point, I'm going to object that this is beyond the scope.
0160.
Thank you. I have nothing further at this time, Your Honor.
Can you be direct?
Just a couple of things. Ms. Whalen, are you certain that at least during the beginning of Erik's stay with your family, before your brother left for school, Erik indeed slept at your house each night?
Yes, I'm most certain.
And are you less certain that he slept at your house each and every night after Casey went to Santa Barbara?
Yes.
Could there have been a night or two that he didn't sleep at your house after Casey left for Santa Barbara?
It is possible.
Now, the other thing is, I'm trying to understand what happened to the note after it was put in the trash so that we still have it and it didn't wind up at the dump.
Well, Casey had only been gone a week, and he had left the trash basket in his room.
I see. So he then retrieved it.
Yes.
And it was the same note that you had recalled from the jail.
Yeah.
Overall.
Did you see your brother write a new note to produce it in court?
No.
Was your mother present when he in the house when he retrieved the note?
I believe we were all downstairs and he got it upstairs.
And isn't it true that when he went and retrieved the note, I was on the telephone.
This is leading, Your Honor.
Was I on the telephone with you and members of your family when Casey went looking for the note?
Yes.
And did you overhear Casey saying something to me about he might still have a note?
Objection calls for hearsay.
Overall.
Yes.
And did he then hand the phone to someone else and go upstairs?
Yes.
And did you then see him come downstairs?
Yes.
And did you see the note in his hand?
Yes.
I've nothing.
Ms. Whalen, when your brother put the note up on the glass, you didn't see the note, did you?
No.
He put it away from you.
Yes, Erik couldn't see it.
So you can't testify as to what he put up there that day, can you?
Well, yes, because the note was sitting down I saw him writing.
You saw him write the note?
It's a small glass area. It's smaller than this. And he was in a chair and I was standing right next to him, over him. So there's nothing else that he wrote.
When he put this note up on the window, how did Erik Menendez respond to him?
I don't recall that it was any, do you want what he said exactly?
Yes, you saw your brother write this note, supposedly. You saw your brother put this note up on the glass.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose you're interested to see how Erik Menendez responded?
Objection, Your Honor. Argumentative.
Overall.
I believe Erik said, I believe he said,
Well, Your Honor, I'm not sure the witness has personal knowledge.
I don't recall exactly what he said. He was on a phone, so I would have to have read his lips.
I would object to lip reading at this point.
All right, your next question, please.
Did he do anything physically? Did he shrug his shoulders, or did he nod his head? Did he do anything of that nature?
I think he kind of shrugged his shoulders, but I don't believe it was anything outstanding. I don't recall his reaction.
Not a big reaction.
Being
in other
anything
words.
of memory.
Now, you've talked to both your brother and your mother about the events that occurred when Erik stayed at your house back in late August, early September of 1989, correct?
Yes.
And you've discussed that over the weekend?
No, Casey left on Friday.
You discussed it with your brother last week when he testified over the 2 days?
I believe, yes.
In fact, you came to the courthouse with him, correct?
Yes.
And you were with your mother as well?
Yes.
And you've had discussions with your brother about what occurred during that period of time, is that correct?
Yes.
Discuss the case?
We discussed what happened.
What do you mean by that?
Your Honor, I'm going to object that this one is beyond the scope of redirect.
We discussed what happened when Erik was there at our house.
And were there things that you filled in and things that the other members of your family filled in that you couldn't remember?
I actually have the best memory out of everyone, and I remembered where we ate dinner. I remembered most things.
Do you remember ever going out to dinner with Erik Menendez and your mother and Casey during any of those other days that Erik Menendez spent at your house during that period of time?
No.
Never went to dinner again?
I don't recall us, all four of us, being out together again.
What happened the next day?
Your Honor, I'm going to object this is beyond the scope of redirect.
Your Honor, may we approach? Thank you. First night you had indicated that Erik Menendez stayed over at your house, that you went to dinner, correct?
Yes.
And it was with two other members of your family.
Yes.
Did you come home to your house after dinner?
I believe so, yes.
You believe so?
I don't recall going anywhere else besides home.
Okay. That night, did your brother or Erik Menendez go anywhere?
Not to my knowledge.
You don't recall?
No.
The next night, or the next day, what do you remember about that day?
I believe... I don't recall. I don't recall anything specific about that day.
The next day after that, what do you recall?
Nothing.
How about the following day?
I believe that we went and did things to get my brother ready for school.
When you say we did things, who are you referring to?
My mom and I and my brother.
And Erik Menendez was not with you?
I don't recall.
And the next day, what happened?
I believe that was Tuesday, and Casey left.
Okay, you remember that?
Mm-hmm. Well, yes.
That's yes? After Casey left, what do you remember about Erik Menendez being at your house?
I remember during the days he played tennis. I remember one day specifically when he had just gotten back from playing tennis.
Was that the day after Casey left?
It could have been. It could have been the following day.
All right, the next day. This is 2 days after Casey left. What happened?
I don't recall for sure.
All right.
I didn't.
And the third day?
No.
And the fourth?
No.
The fifth?
I don't. I mean, it was 4 years ago. I don't remember exactly what I did.
Do you remember what Erik Menendez was doing during that period of time?
I don't know what he did every minute of the day. No.
Is your memory pretty vague as to what occurred during that period of time?
I assume so, but I didn't stop to write it down, what I was doing.
Now, during this period of time, did you see Craig Signorelli?
Objection, Your Honor, beyond the scope.
No.
You never saw him at your house?
No. Not while I was home.
And you were home most of the time?
No, not necessarily. I recall my mother telling me that he'd come by, but I did not see him myself.
I have nothing further at this time.
No, Your Honor.
All right.
Douglas Herbert Doss. Last name is Doss.
Look at that mullet. Look at that mullet and look at that tie. We are back in the 90s, baby. Okay. So that was Katie Whalen. This is our last witness now. Is going to be Douglas Doss. Sorry, let's see. Okay, were there any questions that I have saved that I need to revisit? Oh, here's one from earlier. From Dalabar, what happens with a deaf witness? Are objections just made and the translator translates? And what about other disabilities like sleep disorders where someone has a limited amount of functional time? That's a very good question. So when it comes to someone who is deaf or blind or doesn't speak English, sometimes you have a witness that has a translator that is an official translator. I have taken depositions with translators before. You have sometimes it can kind of create a little bit of an advantage for the party that is calling that person, the person that wants that person to testify, because there's a little bit of a delay that gives you a little bit more time to object when the other side, or some reaction time for the other side to object. Anyway, or sorry, the side that is interested in having that party. Anyway, whatever. There's a little bit of an advantage that can happen to one side because of the time it takes for the person to say what they're responding to, and then the translator to translate, and then the attorney to process, and then to object. Like it's just there's time because it's like it's a game of telephone that goes one way and then the other way and then one way and the other way. It's similar with somebody who's deaf because they'll have someone who will interpret sign language one way and then another. That's what will happen, but they will translate, everything to this person. That basically the translator is acting as a conduit of the conversation happening, in each direction. So, that'll happen. And sometimes, you've got people in a courtroom who don't speak English or who cannot communicate in the normal spoken word, that will happen. And then disabilities like sleep disorders where someone has limited amount of functional time. The capacity to testify will be one thing that is gone over by the courtroom, to say like, are you conscious now? Are you able to testify? Do you have enough energy to do so? Sometimes there will be accommodations that can be made to allow this person to testify, but courtrooms can only go so far in terms of accommodations also. So it's like you kind of have to balance a lot of different interests, right? Because you can't just like bring everyone back just to have someone testify like a little bit one day, a little bit another, a little bit another. If they're able to fill in the rest of the time, with other witnesses. But generally speaking, you want to, it might be up to the attorney that is calling that witness to really truncate their testimony to only what they need. Like really, really, entirely depends on the circumstances though of like that whole situation. So, but that's a very, very interesting question. Thank you. Okay, let's continue now with Mr. Douglas Doss with a fantastic head of hair. Let's go.
Why don't you sit here so you can see me?
Herbert.
Mr. Doss, what is your occupation?
I'm the director of tennis at Mountaingate Country Club.
You're whispering. I can hardly hear
Oh,
you.
sorry. I'm the director of tennis at Mountaingate Country Club.
And Mountaingate Country Club is here in Los Angeles
Yes, it
County?
is.
And being director of tennis, does that mean that you're basically a tennis expert, tennis pro, tennis coach?
Yeah.
And how long have you been involved in that sort of capacity with tennis?
About 20 years.
Now, several years ago, did you make the acquaintance of Erik Menendez and his family?
Yes, I did.
At the time you made their acquaintance, where were you employed?
The Calabasas Park Tennis Club.
And what was your position at Calabasas Park Tennis Club?
I was the manager and director of tennis, head pro.
And do you remember approximately what year it was when you first made the acquaintance of Erik and his family?
Not exactly, 87 maybe. I don't really recall exactly the year.
When did you start at the Calabasas Park Tennis Club?
So I worked for Warner Center Club. We took over Calabasas in 84, I believe it was, for 4 years.
Okay.
We ran 2 clubs at the same time.
Warner Center was another tennis club in the San Fernando Valley?
Yes.
That one's off Canoga?
Right, in Woodland Hills.
Now, do you know if the Menendez family belonged to, strike that, at some point, did the Menendez family join the Calabasas Park Tennis Club?
Yes, they did.
Did that also give them privileges at the Warner Center Club?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, when you worked at Calabasas Park Tennis Club, was there a group of youngsters that you were coaching?
Yeah, there was quite a few kids there at the time.
And by kids, what age group were you mainly concerned with?
12 to 16, 12 to 17.
And were there a group of kids who were from Calabasas High School who also belonged or were members of the club?
Yes.
And when you met Erik Menendez, was he attending Calabasas High School?
Yeah, he was just moving into the area and just starting school.
If I were to tell you that the family moved into the area in the fall of 1986, would that refresh your recollection about when you met them?
Yeah, sure. Definitely.
And it was just when they had come to the area?
Right, right.
Now, this group of, let's focus on where there are a certain group of kids who are at Calabasas Park Tennis Club who were high schoolers.
Yes.
And is that the group that Erik eventually became a member of?
Right.
And how would you compare Erik, as far as his behavior and personality, to the other members of that high school age group?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Did Erik stand out somehow in your notice?
When he first came to the club,
Well, after you got to know him,
he was fairly calm. I mean, compared to a lot of the other kids that were how do you say, much wilder than normal kids, you know. But he was pretty calm guy.
When you say these other kids were wilder than normal kids, were they good kids? I mean,
Oh, they're basically good kids.
Sustained. Let's get to the point here.
did you notice in the course, first of all, did you coach Erik?
Yes.
Did you teach him?
Yeah.
Over how long a period of time?
Well, privately a very short time, but he was in the junior program itself for a couple of years.
So you knew him and had contact with him over a period of a couple of years, say from 86 to 88?
Right.
And at some point did he just leave Calabasas Park Tennis Club?
Yes.
And to the best of your recollection, that would have been 88?
Yeah.
Did he also receive private coaching from other coaches that you were aware of?
Yes.
Now, in the course of your acquaintance with Erik, did he ever demonstrate any aggressiveness towards authority figures?
Not aggressiveness, no, huh?
Well, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, no, never. No, not hostile at all.
What did he exhibit towards authority figures, such as you were an authority figure
Yeah,
at that club?
Yeah. We got along fairly well. He had a great sense of humor. He worked really hard, extremely hard, and at times he'd just space out during lessons and such. But
We'll get to that. But he worked hard.
Yeah.
Was he obedient, respectful to
Oh,
authority?
definitely. Yeah, he was.
Sustained. The answer's good.
Well, Your Honor, I'd like to be heard.
Counsel, let's move on to something else.
Okay. Was there something you observed about Erik that seemed unusual or abnormal during the course of workouts?
Objection, David.
Understand what she's asking?
Yeah.
Okay, overall.
Okay. Did you observe something that seemed very unusual to you?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And if you could, speaking slowly, describe for us
Okay.
what this was that you would observe.
Okay. As I said before, Erik was a very hard worker on the court, and he'd basically do everything he was asked to do. And but there were times when he would just disappear mentally. He'd just space out, and he'd be gone for a second, and then he'd start laughing about it. And I just assumed that was his sense of humor because that's where we connected more than anything else, is that level of humor that he had. But he would just be gone. And for no real apparent reason. It wasn't like it was real stressful or it was something I was asking him to do that he wasn't capable of doing. It would just be a time where I wouldn't expect it and he'd be gone.
He just seemed to, his concentration would seem to evaporate.
It was over. And it wouldn't last very long, just very short periods of time. And then we'd take a break and talk about it or whatever, but it wasn't,
Now,
wasn't expected.
sometimes when you're working with kids, with teenagers, and you're pushing them, do they sort of stop working or break concentration in a deliberate way?
Some kids will because they don't want to do it. But I mean, most kids
go ahead.
Most kids at that level of workout will stay with you, and you can tell when they've had enough. You can tell when they're about ready to, to break or need a break. And
These things that you noticed with Erik, though, was it what you had seen with any other kid?
Sustained.
What was different about what you saw with Erik?
Sustained.
Your Honor, I'm trying to
He's
get
described how he observed this incident. That's sufficient.
Would Erik be able to tell you afterwards what had gone on mentally in his head that caused him to space out?
Overall.
No.
I mean, was there a discussion about it where you'd want to know?
I would try to find out, but he wouldn't even know. Actually, it was more of a
speculation.
Sustained. That answer is stricken.
Did he indicate to you that he didn't know?
That's what it was. Yeah, he didn't know.
Now, did you ever observe Erik's father at the Calabasas Park Tennis Club?
Yes.
And specifically, did you observe an incident that involving Mr. Menendez, Erik, and his brother Lyle?
Yes.
And did you see Lyle from time to time?
Occasionally when he was in town. Yeah.
And could you tell us, with respect to this one incident, what preceded the noticeable aspects of the incident? What was happening?
Erik and Lyle were working out on the front stadium court at Calabasas.
When you say they were working out, what were they doing?
They were hitting with each other, working on their game.
They were hitting balls at each other?
Yeah.
And what occurred?
Mr. Menendez was leaning over the railing. Mr. Menendez was leaning over the railing.
Had he been there, Mr. Menendez, had he been there all the time?
No.
You got to let me finish.
I'm sorry.
That the two sons were working out?
No.
Did you see him show up?
Yeah, he showed up in his work clothes, business suit.
He was wearing a suit?
Yeah, without a coat.
Okay. And when he showed up, he went over to this court that his sons were playing on?
Right, at the end of the railing.
And what did you observe?
A couple things. One, that he started basically yelling at the kids to hit harder, to work harder. And they had been doing that before he arrived.
They were doing what before he arrived?
They were working hard before he arrived, which they always did when they hit with each other. But it changed when he showed up. And because of his demands on them, they were hitting the ball harder, and they always hit it hard anyway. But it changed because it was more it looked like they were mad when they were playing.
Okay.
And
he was demanding that they hit the balls harder and
hard
harder.
as they could.
And they started hitting harder and harder and harder.
Yeah.
Okay. And did he sound satisfied?
No.
What did you hear?
He didn't change his tone. He kept asking for more. So.
And was he addressing his demands more towards one of his sons than the other?
A little more towards Erik, just because Lyle was stronger. But it was towards both of them.
Okay. You had observed, even prior to this incident, the relative strengths and talent of Lyle as a tennis player and Erik as a tennis player. And how would you compare them, very briefly?
Sustained.
Was Lyle physically stronger and a stronger athlete than Erik?
Overall.
Yes, he was.
In your opinion, as a tennis coach, was it reasonable for someone to expect Erik to be able to perform at the same level as Lyle at that time?
Overall.
No.
No.
Yeah, of course not. He's 2 years older at an age where those years make a huge difference. That's of course, obviously. I mean, I'm not saying that to criticize the question. I'm just pointing it out. It's kind of
It was not reasonable?
No, it was not reasonable.
Did Mr. Menendez, when he was making these demands, how did he appear mood-wise? Was he happy, sad, angry, what?
He definitely wasn't happy. I don't know if it was anger, but he was not pleased with what he was saying.
And did you see anything to criticize in what the sons were doing in response to his demands?
Sustained.
As a tennis coach, was there anything that they were doing that was wrong vis-a-vis his demands?
Not before he showed up. When he was there, yeah.
Well,
He was, for what he wanted them to do, it didn't make sense. I mean, you don't do the things, you don't hit the ball 1,000 miles an hour all the time. And that's what he wanted from his kids.
of course, they were trying to do what he wanted.
Of course they were.
And he was not pleased.
No.
So could you figure out any reason why he was not happy with them obeying his instructions?
Objection, Puls.
Sustained.
Now, did you hear Mr. Menendez say critical things besides the demands? Was he saying berating or critical things to either of his sons?
I don't recall the exact words, but that was the tone of it.
Now, were you also acquainted through the Calabasas Tennis Club with a young man named Craig Signorelli?
Yes, I was.
And were you aware that Craig and Erik knew each other?
Yes.
Ooh, more on Craig Signorelli.
And do you recall at some point after Erik and Lyle were arrested, being at the pro shop at Warner Center Club and hearing a conversation of Craig Signorelli's?
He was actually in the workout facility at Warner.
It was at the workout
Yeah.
at the Warner Club.
Right.
And was Craig Signorelli in that workout facility?
Yes, he was.
And did you overhear him talking?
No, he was talking to me.
So he was talking to you directly?
Yeah.
And can you describe what his tone was when he was talking to you? What his demeanor was?
It was gloating, maybe. I don't know what he was telling me a story and he was very proud about it, that he was involved in the story he was telling me.
And he was telling you of his involvement in what?
In the Menendez situation at the time.
And did he say anything to you about his expectations or any expectations he had because of his involvement?
That was the gist of the conversation about him, book deals and movie deals, that type of thing, that he knew the facts and that, he was bragging about it.
What was he saying about book deals?
Well, there was a book in this for him. He was going to write a book about it.
And what was that going to do for him?
I don't know, fame and money, who knows? I mean, but that's what he was talking about.
Did he say that he was going to make a lot of money from what he knew?
Yeah.
And how did you respond to him?
I told him he should keep his mouth shut because the facts weren't out. And he said, well, they are. I know the facts. He proceeded to tell me the facts. I'm going, well, we don't know that. And this was in a room of people, that the people were working out. Anybody could hear this. And I told him he just should be quiet.
And did he seem to enjoy talking about this in front of all these other people?
Yeah. It wasn't like a quiet conversation.
It was a boastful conversation?
A bit, yeah.
Now, Mr. Doss, do you recall myself and my private investigator, Miss Erdely, interviewing you in July of 1992?
Yes.
Up at the Mountaingate Country Club.
Mm-hmm.
And do you recall at that time we gave you for you to review a police report purporting to contain a statement from you to Detective Zoller, I suppose it is.
Yes.
And did you review that police report in July when I first showed it to you?
I did.
Yes.
Anyway, back to July of 92. Did you read it? I think it's like a 2-paragraph statement of yours in this police report.
Yes.
And did that 2 paragraphs in this report accurately reflect what you had told the Beverly Hills Police Department?
Not exactly, no.
And for example, Had you told the Beverly Hills Police Department that Erik was a wild kid, very high strung?
No.
What had you told them about Erik's temperament and personality?
That, well, exactly what the exact words I'm not sure, but because it's been a while. But that wildness wasn't like the other kids that were at that club at the time. It was more like a young lion just kind of expressing himself and finding out what his boundaries were, but not. It wasn't negative. You know, it wasn't like he was obnoxious and pushy like a lot of the kids were, without any discipline.
Okay. So did Erik appear to have discipline?
Oh, yes, he did.
Did he appear to be hardworking and obedient?
Yes.
And even as to these other kids who were wilder, did they all turn out okay?
Yeah, they did, actually. Even the wildest ones.
Okay. Now, did you tell the Beverly Hills Police in your interview, I believe this interview was August 29th, 1989, that Erik's father was very interested in his tennis game and would always make sure that he concentrated on his game?
No.
What did you tell them about Jose Menendez and his attitude towards his son and his tennis?
What I told him was I thought that he was overbearing and basically living through his kids like a lot of, parents do in sport. And it wasn't realistic. But not that he was attentive and all that.
Attentive sounds positive.
Yes.
Did you think Mr. Menendez's involvement in his son's sports was positive?
No, I did not.
Speculation, no proper opinion.
So
Okay,
it
I have
seems,
nothing further. Thank you, Mr. Dawson.
so it seems that there's another discrepancy in one of the police witness reports. So this is where the witness talked with the police. They had an interview with the police. The police wrote down, it wasn't a transcript, right? There was no person, no like court reporter that was taking down the interview word for word. The police officer was just sort of like summarizing the conversation. The language that was used by the police officer in the report doesn't really accurately reflect what the witness said to the police officer had happened. We've heard other witnesses talk about this before now, and now we are hearing from Douglas Doss saying the same thing, that they use the word that attentive to describe Jose in terms of his activity with the boys on the tennis court. He says attentive is not the right word because it's much more positive. He wasn't attentive. He was overbearing and unrealistic. That's what I told the police, and they didn't write that down. They wrote down attentive, which is a very different vibe. So, defense wants to point these out as often as they can because, that is helpful to the defense case if they're able to point out, just like, the prosecution wanted to point out when a report that the defense made from an interview with a witness was inaccurate on something. There's a little bit more of a material difference, though, in my opinion, on this, because it's like it does change the vibe of what this witness was saying about Jose. Okay, we've got a tiny bit more of testimony from this witness. It's probably the rest is going to be cross-examination, I would imagine.
How long is the cross-examination?
Maybe 10 minutes.
Thank you, Your Honor. So you had indicated that you had actually coached Erik Menendez for a short period of time over this 2-year period.
Yes.
Was a coach by the name of Craig Heinberg the coach?
Yes, he was.
And how long was Craig Heinberg the coach?
I don't know that. I don't know how long he coached him because I know that a gentleman named Paul Hobach coached him as well.
Okay.
So I don't know how long Craig was involved with that.
Do you know Craig Heinberg?
Yes, I do.
And how do you know him?
Through tennis.
I'm sorry. How was that?
Through tennis. I mean, he was at the Calabasas Tennis Club when we took over the club.
Okay, and
He was teaching there.
So you were the manager and he was one of your coaches?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yes.
And he was the one that was given the task of coaching Erik Menendez.
I don't know if he was given the task. I know that he was coaching a lot of the kids at that time, along with some of the other pros that were there as well. I don't know how long that was with Erik.
Now, you remember talking to the detectives from the Beverly Hills Police Department on August 29th, 1989?
Yes.
And you told the detectives at that time about the coach, Craig Heinberg. Isn't that correct?
I believe so. I believe I did.
And
I don't recall the.
I have a objection on that, that mistakes in the report.
at some point, did you tell the detectives about Coach Craig Heinberg?
Yes.
And you've testified here that Erik Menendez, you had said that he was a wild kid in the report, but you said he wasn't wilder than some of the other.
It wasn't wild in a negative sense. I wasn't saying that he was out of control and that type of thing. It wasn't a negative statement towards it.
And you were asked about your association with Erik Menendez over these 2 years from, I believe, 1986 to 1988. And you said that Erik was not hostile, not aggressive. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
And this is what you knew about him over that 2 year period?
Right, my experience with him.
Okay. You knew that Craig Heinberg, the coach, had problems with Erik Menendez.
Objection, Your Honor, calls for hearsay. Well, I'd like to approach on this whole.
Isn't that correct, sir?
I had heard, yes. He had problems with him.
What had you heard?
Your Honor, I'm objecting. This calls for hearsay. They can call Mr. Heinberg if they want to.
Counsel, let's not argue the matter. Overruled.
What had you heard about the incidents between Erik Menendez?
I had heard that he had trouble with him disciplinary-wise.
That who had trouble with
That
him?
Craig had trouble with Erik.
Craig Heinberg.
Yes.
And what in particular did you hear about that?
Objection, hearsay.
Sustained as to the specifics.
Were you given any information about the breaking into?
Objection, Your Honor, and I'd ask to approach, and I'd cite the proper.
Whoa! Ooh, she's
All
getting
right,
spicy.
we'll hear your discussion at the sidebar, and the jury is admonished to disregard the remarks of counsel. Lawyers can say things, but when they say things, they're addressing me and they're not addressing the jury. When the lawyers address the jury, they'll do that in closing argument when they have a chance to comment on the evidence. Discussions at this point are directed towards the court. All right, let's see counsel at the sidebar.
We were talking about this coach, Craig Heinberg. When you spoke to the police on August 29th, 1989, had you been given information from Craig Heinberg about his relationship with the defendant in this case?
I don't know if it was directly from Craig, but
I'm going to object, Your Honor, and for any further answers.
All right,
Calling for hearsay.
did you understand the question?
yes, I did.
Okay, and it's either yes or no.
No.
Okay.
You had
Okay.
not received information directly from Mr. Heinberg?
No.
Had you gotten information regarding the relationship between Mr. Heinberg and the defendant in this case, however?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for hearsay.
Overruled.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Can you redirect?
Your Honor.
All right, thank you. You may step down. You're excused, subject to being recalled.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, and let's get the gold jury in as well, please, and the other parties. Both juries are back in court, and I've just been conferring with counsel. I know the gold jury especially has not been in the courtroom very long for testimony today. And I've been conferring with counsel regarding the scheduling here. There are matters that the lawyers and I will be discussing this afternoon, and it's going to, from what they tell me, it could very well spill over into tomorrow, at least to some extent, regarding discussions that they and I will have here regarding.
Okay, what he's getting at is it's going to take a long time. They've got some stuff that they've got to talk about, and he's probably going to excuse them for the day or what have you. Okay, so what just happened there? I know we've got some questions here because Leslie got really fired up. Okay, so tracking back, Kuriyama was on cross-examining this witness, Douglas Doss, and the question came up asking about another coach's experience with Erik. Now, it's tricky because he's asking not for this witness's experience, not what he saw, not what he heard, not what he experienced himself, witnessing with his own five senses, but information that he received from someone else. It can get tricky. Could be hearsay, could be not. Generally speaking, we're definitely alarm bells are ringing for hearsay on this. The question was, it had to do with this other coach, Craig Heisenberg, saying that he had had some discipline issues with Erik Menendez. Now, the judge allowed the general gist of that communication in above, over Leslie's hearsay objections. But the moment that Kuriyama wanted to ask for specifics, he sustained her objections as to hearsay, because he's like, you can't ask him about specifics, like, because, and the reason for that is because the general gist is like, you can get a little bit of reputation, you can get you can get some broad brushstrokes, but once you start getting into specifics, then it's like, it looks like you are actually getting those other side conversations, these out of court statements, in for the truth of what they were saying. Because you can get a little bit of reputation. We've gotten some of that from teachers, right? Because they have had access to Erik's file or Lyle's file on how they were performing prior to the student arriving in their class, right? Because, and the reason why they have access to it is so that they can get a bit of information as to things that they've struggled with in the past, that could indicate what they might be struggling with, or what they might struggle with in their class through that semester or that year, what have you. So having these instructors, these coaches, these teachers know about the things that they have struggled with other similar instructors or teachers or tutors can be relevant to that witness's overall conception of how they saw the witness, or how they saw the party, in this case, one of the brothers. So the judge is going to let a little bit of that in, but hi. But when it comes to specifics, that's where things get a little bit hello. That's where things get a little bit improper. So here, Kuriyama's trying to get, there's something spicy that Kuriyama wants to talk about, but to Leslie's point, she says, you want the testimony, not on the keyboard. I need to give this more of an angle so that she doesn't jump on it. To Leslie's point, if you want testimony from Heisenberg or Heinberg, if you want testimony from Heinberg, talk to Heinberg, call him as a witness. The prosecution at this point still has the ability to call rebuttal witnesses after the defense case in chief. So they do have that opportunity if they so choose. So that is a very valid point for the defense perspective. So she's getting a little fierce here in defense of her client. Yeah. So you see her pounding on the table because whatever it is that she wanted to see. Oh, I didn't even realize that the kitty brought up this chat right here. Kitty smooches everyone from Draco Amy. I did not press on that. That was the cat brought that up. So yeah. Okay. So that's basically what happened there. And it looks like Kuriyama lost on those objections. Leslie Abramson won. Yeah. So, yes, you want all of the attention and all of the loves, little kitty. So anyway, okay. That is the last witness for today. This has been really great. Next week, let me see here. Are we almost to the Menendez brothers next? Let's see. hear it. We might be almost there. Okay. Lyle Menendez testimony hearing. And then Mary Teresa Dominguez. Okay. So we've got one more witness before Lyle Menendez testifies in court. So hold on to your butts. It's gonna happen. And then we're gonna hear from Lyle Menendez for basically forever. And then we're gonna hear from Erik Menendez also for forever. So okay, and also Care Bear says, yeah, next week is one witness and then Lyle. Big trigger warning for next week. Okay, good to know. Very good to know. But so definitely stay tuned. One more witness, and then we've got a lot of Lyle, which I'm sure is just going to be rough. For whatever it is that he's going to be testifying to, I'm sure there's going to be just a lot to finally hear from him. So, yeah. How many left until the brothers will testify? We've got one more episode. One more witness. And I think that, let me see how long, if that person is going to be testifying, how long will that be? Actually, I think we're going to start with, we are going to get to Lyle next week because that is only like an hour long, that entire like portion of the next witness. So yeah, next week we are definitely getting into, we're going to start Lyle's testimony. So yeah, next week, get ready for it. We're going to hear from Lyle as well. So yeah. Okay. That is about it for me for this one. Thank you so much for joining me. This has been another ride. We've got, more teachers, more tennis instructors, more, classmates or what have you. I don't feel like it really moved the needle all that much today, but obviously next week that's going to be a very different story because we're, hearing from Erik and Lyle is huge. And yeah, let's see. One last question. Dater says, do you understand why she reacted the way she did, or was it exaggerated as to what happened? I think she got frustrated because she didn't want that, whatever that testimony was going to be about. She didn't want that in, whether it was because it was damaging or whether it was because it was highly inappropriate for that to be let in. I'm not entirely sure. I think she had already objected once to it, and he's trying to get around it, get around the objection to get that in. It may have just been like, oh hell no, her coming in like a spicy mama bear. We've seen that a little bit from her from time to time. So that may have been what was going on here. So, oh, and also from Jan, yes, Bike Club will be happening on Friday. So for all of you folks that are Bike Club members, we will be having Bike Club Friday members only live stream. So come and join us for that. Also going to come out with part 2 next in the Colleen Ballinger series saga. So came out with part 1 last week. Part 2 is going to come out this week. I'm going to try to also do part 3 this week. Fingers crossed. Part 2 is definitely going to be shorter than part 1. So I'm hoping that I can lickety split on part 2 and part 3. Yeah, keep your eyes peeled for that. And otherwise, Bike Club on Friday, Lawyers and Dragons on Saturday over at Hogue Law. And then next Monday, I'll see you guys right here. We've got one witness and we're going to hear from Lyle Menendez. Okay. All right. That does it for me. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you to everybody in the chat. Thank you to everybody that gifted memberships to people in the chat. And as always, thank you to the mods for making sure that conversation remains, respectful and everybody feels warm and welcome in the chat, to express themselves in a way that is, professional and appropriate, so to speak. So otherwise, thank you to everyone, and I will see you guys